and he said that they can supply as many mechs as we want. Their reserves are several times what we purchase. Such powerful mechs were described by him as if they were ordinary commodities. Think about that. Odibeo's words left everyone deep in thought. They could hardly imagine that the mech reserves of the Dragon Country were so vast. After a long while, someone said, "Why does it feel like such powerful mechs are as common as cabbages in the Dragon Country?" Some couldn't believe it, thinking that the Dragon Country was trying to fool them. After all, in their minds, such powerful military equipment shouldn't be so readily available in large quantities. General Mueller then spoke up. "The Dragon Country called us and said that if we need mechs, we should contact them directly. They can provide immediate stock." The high-ranking officials from another country quickly echoed, "The Dragon Country told us the same thing." Others joined in, stating that they had also received similar calls. Now, these officials were completely stunned. They suddenly realized that if the reserves of the Dragon Country were not substantial, they wouldn't be contacting so many nations at once, promising to provide immediate stock. Unless the Dragon Kingdom has a stockpile of mechs that can meet the massive demands of these countries. The more they think about it, the more terrifying it seems. By this logic, the Dragon Kingdom must have at least several hundred mechs. The Dragon Kingdom's super military manufacturing center quietly sits in the rolling deep mountains, like a technological fortress hidden from the world. This military manufacturing center is heavily guarded, with soldiers at every post fully focused and vigilantly watching for any movement around them. In the sky, stealth mechs act as silent guardians, always on standby, ready to respond to any potential threats. The security measures here are impeccable, creating a strong sense of solemnity and authority. Lu Qingji has been ordered to come to this mysterious place. He is to receive the completed space mechs and take these massive machines to the shipyard. This is also the factory for the first-generation mechs, where new first-generation mechs slowly roll out of the factory every day, like newly born steel warriors. Lu Qingji is filled with curiosity about this place, as it is his first time here. His gaze continuously scans the surroundings, filled with awe. He did not expect that hidden behind what seemed to be a remote mountain forest lay such a technologically advanced military manufacturing factory. The person in charge, Zhao Cheng, smiled and explained as he watched Lu Qingji's curious expression. "This is mainly to facilitate the testing of the military equipment we manufacture. Both the first-generation mechs and the space mechs require rigorous testing after completion, and only qualified products can be equipped to our military. The first-generation mechs are relatively small and easier to test. However, the space mechs are too large, making it difficult to maintain confidentiality during testing. Therefore, we move the manufacturing base to these deep mountains, which maximizes the safety and confidentiality of the testing process." Just then, a loud howling sound suddenly echoed from the sky. The sound was like a roar from an ancient behemoth, shaking the soul. Lu Qingji quickly turned to look. Chapter 219. I was still conservative. Lu Qingji instinctively looked up and saw a massive space mech appear in his line of sight. Its enormous body resembled a flying small fortress, exuding a powerful sense of oppression. Lu Qingji was deeply shocked by this spectacular sight and nodded. No wonder the base was built in the mountains. Such a large object would indeed be easily discovered by the outside world. Although the space mech itself has stealth capabilities, this function cannot be continuously activated during testing, as it would affect the accuracy of data recording and monitoring. At this moment, Lu Qingji was suddenly attracted by another spectacle in the sky. He saw a squad of first-generation mechs appearing in the air. The number of these mechs was quite frightening, totaling 200 to 300. They were neatly arranged in the sky, resembling a forest of steel. Lu Qingji was stunned, his eyes filled with surprise and confusion. "What are these mechs for?" he subconsciously asked. Zhao Cheng was already used to it, and replied casually, "Oh, you mean those patrolling ones?" Lu Qingji was even more confused. "So many mechas patrolling together?" Zhao Cheng raised his chin slightly and retorted, "Are these mechas too many? It's just one company, right?" Lu Qingji was baffled by his words. "What do you mean it's just one company? Isn't a company of mechas already a lot? These mechas could take down a major power." Zhao Cheng looked at Lu Qingji in surprise. "Old Lu, aren't you our country's representative for mecha sales abroad? You should know about our country's mecha reserves." Lu Qingji responded helplessly. "How would I know? They just told me to sell as much as I can. They said there are plenty of mechas. I feel like there are at least 400 or 500 units." Zhao Cheng understood Lu Qingji's confusion and smiled. "No wonder a mere company of mechas could get you so excited. You really have no understanding of our country's mecha reserves." Lu Qingji was taken aback and reacted. "So according to you, I should want less?" A proud smile appeared at the corner of Zhao Cheng's mouth. "It's not just that I want less. It's actually too few. The order from above is..." Zhao Cheng cautiously looked around to ensure no one else was present before lowering his voice. "To build a mecha core of a division." Lu Qingji was stunned, his mouth slightly open, unable to speak for a while. "A division's mecha core? That's over 8,000 mechas." Lu Qingji's voice started to stammer. "So, have we already built them?" Lu Qingji asked eagerly. Zhao Cheng waved his hand. "It's not that easy to build. We've at most produced about 70 to 80%. Boom. Lu Qingji was completely shocked. He was bewildered by Zhao Cheng's response. He quickly calculated in his mind that based on past organization, a division in our military had about 10,000 to 12,000 personnel, but with military reforms, a division now consists of about 8,000 to 10,000 troops. If we take 8,000 as the base, then 70 to 80% means at least over 5,000. This implies that our country has at least manufactured over 5,000 first-generation mechas. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but exclaim. No wonder they directly used a few hundred mechas that could defeat a major power as a patrol team. It turns out our country is already this formidable. While Zhao Cheng was still talking about how difficult it is to produce, Lu Qingji was secretly muttering in his heart. You say it's hard to produce. But you've already made over 1,000 mechas? At this moment, Zhao Cheng spoke again. Old Lu, there is something I don't quite understand. Lu Qingji responded. Go ahead. Zhao Cheng said. You see, although the first-generation mechas aren't as powerful as the space mechas, we can't just sell the first-generation mechas as commodities. These things are quite impressive. They are advanced. Especially the artificial intelligence. I could chat with it for a year. Plus, the cost of a mecha is only a few 100,000. Even if you sell them, how much can you sell? At most a few billion. Do we really need that little money? Do you think what I said is right? Lu Qingji was taken aback for a moment. Several 100 million? He almost burst into laughter at Zhao Cheng's words. You still don't understand technology like a big player would. Zhao Cheng retorted. How can I not understand technology? It's precisely because I understand it that I feel such advanced mechs shouldn't be sold. Lu Qingji quickly clarified. No. What I mean is that you don't respect technology. Zhao Cheng became even more indignant. But then he heard Lu Qingji say, this mech. We're selling for 300 billion. Oh, 300 billion? What? Lao Lu, how much are you saying the mech sells for? 300 billion? A mech that costs hundreds of thousands can actually sell for 300 billion. The enormous price gap left Zhao Cheng speechless. He widened his eyes, as if he couldn't believe his ears. In his understanding, a mech costing hundreds of thousands, no matter how impressive, could never sell for such a high price. Lu Qingji shrugged, his tone carrying a hint of inevitability. Otherwise, a mech as impressive as this, are we going to sell it for a few 100 million? Using your words, do we need those few 100 million? His words revealed confidence in the strength of their country and a firm understanding of the mech's value. After hearing Lu Qingji, Zhao Cheng realized that his previous thoughts were indeed too simplistic. Selling a mech costing hundreds of thousands for hundreds of billions seemed unreasonable from a cost-price comparison. But who said it wasn't a high-tech product? The advanced technology and powerful performance contained in these mechs were indeed worth such a high price. However, a trace of worry surged in Zhao Cheng's heart. At such a high price, will anyone buy it? Lu Qingji smiled slightly and said, Didn't we just transfer 82 mechs from your side a few days ago? Zhao Cheng then remembered that all those transferred mechs had been sold. He was only responsible for production. The purpose of these mechs was a decision made by higher-ups, so he hadn't paid much attention. He didn't expect them all to be sold. Goodness, 82 units at 300 billion each. That's directly over 20 trillion. This thing is way too profitable. It seems he had been narrow-minded before. Looking at it this way, the first-generation mechs could also be sold. No, not just sold. They should be sold in large quantities. Lao Lu, with such high profits, why did you only sell a few dozen? Zhao Cheng's expression changed instantly. We need to promote it. Heavily promote how great our mechs are. Let us try to sell more. If it were me, I'd sell several hundred, or even thousands. Hearing Zhao Cheng's words, Lu Qingji couldn't help but twitch his mouth. You change your tune too quickly. Don't you remember who was just shouting not to sell? Now you want me to sell in large quantities? Chapter 220. Why not compose a poem? Zhao Cheng didn't feel embarrassed. He chuckled and said, different times, different circumstances. Lu Qingji was impatient to discuss this with him. He waved his hand and said, all right, the task is urgent. Stop bragging. All right. Zhao Cheng grinned and then led Lu Qingji to a passageway leading to a square at a certain base. Before entering the square, Zhao Cheng reminded Lu Qingji to be mentally prepared and not to be scared. Lu Qingji, however, was unconcerned and confidently said, what could possibly scare me? I've seen all kinds of storms. Yet, when the gate of the passage slowly opened, a breathtaking scene unfolded. In the vast square, 50 brand new space mechs stood majestically atop the base. They resembled a mysterious forest meticulously forged from steel, exuding an awe-inspiring aura of power. Their massive and imposing forms loomed like towering peaks, seemingly capable of overshadowing even the sun's scorching and dazzling rays. As the shadows of these mechs fell upon the ground, the entire area was instantly enveloped in darkness, as if shrouded by a mystical veil. They stood silently, their metal exteriors glimmering with a cold sheen in the faint light, as if narrating tales of endless strength and majesty. Each mech appeared as an independent fortress of steel, unbreakable, instilling a strong sense of safety and pressure. Their silent demeanor seemed to harbor boundless energy, ready to unleash astonishing power at any critical moment. Lu Qingji was mesmerized, and for a moment, he felt as though he had stepped into a science fiction movie. The more sci-fi it felt, the stronger the thrill when he realized this was reality. Zhao Cheng noticed Lu Qingji was too shocked to speak and couldn't help but laugh. Isn't it stunning? In fact, I was just as deeply shocked by this scene back then. At this moment, I really want to compose a poem. Unfortunately, I'm not cultured enough. So I can only express it this way. The space mechs are amazing, even scaring the daylights out of some folks, and we can laugh about it. Lu Qingji snapped back to reality and rolled his eyes at him, saying, you may not know how to compose poetry, but you sure have a knack for rhyming. Zhao Cheng clasped his fists and smiled. You're too kind, old Lu. Lu Qingji retorted, I wasn't complimenting you. At this moment, he finally regained his composure from the shock. Looking at the 50 space mechs before him, His eyes gradually reddened. Although he knew the country's military strength was nearly invincible, this moment made the invincibility of his homeland tangible. These space mechs were symbols of that invincibility. He took a deep breath to calm the complex emotions within him, then looked at Zhao Cheng and said, "All right, I'll take these mechs with me." Just then, Zhao Cheng suddenly interjected, "Hold on." Lu Qingji was taken aback and asked, "What's wrong?" Zhao Cheng handed him a document, then gave him a phone. He looked up at the sky and smiled. "Could you help us with a small task while transporting these mechs?" Lu Qingji paused for a moment. Then, upon receiving the document, he laughed. He glanced at the sky, nodded, and said, "No problem. This suits me just fine. But before that, I need to make a call." He took the phone from Zhao Cheng and dialed the number. Data transmission in progress. The faint sound of electronic signals echoed like a mysterious incantation in the control room of the space mechs. Every pulsating byte is like a sprite carrying a mission, bearing crucial information, flowing gently like a stream, gradually converging into an immense ocean of knowledge. Data reception complete. Sharing data. Data sharing complete. Reading data. Data reading complete. Confirming task completion. Proceed to the designated location and commence operations immediately. The sound of the space mech resonates, a deep and powerful rumble, as if calling from a distant universe. At this moment, Lu Qingji turns his gaze to the team leader of the space mech pilots, Luo Xingwu. His eyes are filled with anticipation and trust as he asks, "Team leader Luo, are you all clear on the mission assigned to me?" Luo Xingwu stands tall, his gaze firm, and replies solemnly, reporting, "Sir, we are all clear. We guarantee to complete the task." His voice is strong and filled with determination and confidence. Lu Qingji nods slightly and says, "Good. Then let's briefly say goodbye to the base. After this, you will be in a new working environment." Excitement is evident on the faces of Luo Xingwu and his teammates. They have all undergone strict selection before becoming space mech pilots, not just in terms of physical capability, but also family background. The military is never short of strong warriors, but many fall short when it comes to family background. It's not that their family backgrounds are problematic, but the requirements for the family backgrounds of space mech pilots are extremely stringent. Any slight flaw is unacceptable. Luo Xingwu almost got eliminated due to some issues with his ancestors. During the review of his family, it was discovered that one of his forefathers had served time in prison. While this might not be a significant issue in everyday life, it could be a major blemish for a space mech pilot. So why was Luo Xingwu allowed to become a pilot and even promoted to team leader? This was because the reviewers thoroughly investigated the reason for that ancestor's imprisonment, and the charge was actually for providing testimony. This was not a blemish at all. It was clearly a highlight. However, this also illustrates how strict the selection process for pilots is. Naturally, before becoming a space mech pilot, they had to sign a confidentiality agreement. What puzzled them was that just before heading to a new environment, they had to sign an even higher level confidentiality agreement. This filled them with curiosity about the new place they were about to go. Where would they shine and make a difference? Of course, Lu Qingji would not reveal this to them. He noticed the excitement and confusion in their eyes and immediately said, "As for where you are going, you'll find out when you arrive. But before that, you must complete the tasks assigned to us. I will also be observing your capabilities. Those who cannot perform are not worthy of becoming space mech pilots. Do you understand?" Lu Qingji's tone was serious and resolute. "Understood," the soldiers replied in unison, their voices like thunder, filled with determination and resolve. After a brief farewell with Zhao Cheng, Lu Qingji entered the cockpit of Luo Xingwu's mecha. Various instruments inside the cabin flickered with mysterious lights. Activate stealth mode. With Luo Xingwu's command, the other mechas responded in unison. In an instant, a mysterious energy wave spread, and the mechas seemed to vanish into thin air. Watching the mecha army disappear before his eyes, Zhao Cheng felt a strong sense of shock surge within him. He couldn't help but want to recite a poem again, but since there was no one to listen, he gave up. Then, a series of buzzing sounds erupted, signaling the activation of the space mechas. The space mechas soared into the sky, like a group of steel dragons charging into the vast universe. It is worth mentioning that although these mechas activated their stealth mode, they could still see each other to avoid collisions. Thus, they ascended, passing through the atmosphere and reaching outer space. Surrounding them were hundreds of satellites clustered in a corner of space. Only a small portion of these satellites belonged to a certain nation, and they were positioned above their territory to safeguard national security. However, the other satellites were scattered in various directions, with their detection devices aimed at the nation. It was easy to guess which countries these satellites belonged to and their intentions. With the current technological explosion in that nation, some countries, led by a certain power, could not obtain critical intelligence from within. So they resorted to surveillance via satellites to monitor every move. The nation had only recently discovered these countries' little schemes and immediately took action, preparing to eliminate them. This was precisely the mission of the space mechas. Lu Qingji looked at those satellites, which resembled tumors, and felt a surge of anger. The spying actions of these countries severely threatened the nation's security and interests. He promptly ordered the soldiers, "Engage. Be careful not to damage our satellites. If anyone messes up, they will have to explain to the satellite department." Understood. The soldiers responded succinctly and powerfully. Subsequently, the mechas locked onto the satellites one by one. The speed was rapid, and before Lu Qingji could react, the intelligent AI initiated a plan to eliminate the enemy satellites based on prior intelligence. However, Lu Qingji felt a bit bewildered when, Despite witnessing the pilots press the launch button, nothing happened. The satellites did not explode or show any signs of destruction. He thought maybe he just needed to wait for the bullets to fly for a bit. Just as this thought crossed his mind, Luo Xingwu's voice sounded. Report, Commander. We have completed the mission. The enemy satellites have all been destroyed. Hearing this, Lu Qingji was completely stunned. He looked at the satellites that were still operational. His expression blank. Was this what they called destruction? Although he didn't know which ones were the enemy's satellites, he wasn't blind. All those satellites were functioning normally. Which satellites did you destroy? Luo Xingwu noticed the surprise in Lu Qingji's eyes and calmly explained, Chief. Those satellites from hostile nations have indeed been destroyed. We utilized the weapons built into the space mecha to simulate a type of cosmic ray containing high-energy particle streams. This type of ray can quietly destroy the key components within satellite devices. Those satellites you see operating have actually lost their reconnaissance capabilities. Lu Qingji was stunned, filled with amazement. This was incredibly advanced. It seemed that I was falling behind the times. This way, we could stealthily damage enemy satellites, and in the end, they might even blame everything on cosmic rays. The space mecha is truly impressive. No, it should be said that Su Chun is incredible. After all, the space mecha is his masterpiece. Lu Qingji was quite excited at this moment. It made me want to compose a poem. Chapter 221, The Total Destruction of Satellites. The Secretary of State hurriedly walked towards the satellite department, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. As soon as he appeared at the door of the satellite department, the person in charge rushed over, his excited expression seemingly hiding a world-shaking secret. Mr. Secretary of State, you finally made it. The person's voice trembled slightly with excitement, tightly clutching a document as if it were a rare treasure. The Secretary of State frowned slightly, confused by the commotion, but a hint of curiosity was piqued within him. What is going on? Don't keep me in suspense. His tone carried a slight impatience. The person in charge hurriedly handed over the document. We seem to have discovered a military base in a certain nation. His eyes sparkled with fervor. Upon hearing this, the Secretary of State perked up, his previously weary face instantly replaced with excitement. He grabbed the document and eagerly began to flip through it. The images and data on the document pointed to a startling discovery that could potentially be a military base in that nation. If this is true, it would be fantastic news. The corners of the Secretary of State's mouth involuntarily lifted, his eyes filled with excitement. You all did a great job this time. I propose giving everyone a raise. As soon as he finished speaking, the satellite department was instantly drowned in cheers. The Secretary of State and the person in charge walked side by side towards the large screen in the satellite department, where countless data and images flickered, like the eyes of the universe spying on every move on Earth. The person in charge patted his chest and assured, Mr. Secretary of State, all our reconnaissance satellites are now gathered above that nation, conducting a comprehensive and thorough search without missing any details. You can consider us the eyes of our nation. Just as the person in charge finished speaking, the once glowing large screen suddenly went black, as if an invisible hand had snuffed out its life force. Not just this one screen, but all the screens of the observation satellites in the department went dark simultaneously. The entire department fell into a dead silence, with only the lingering cheers seemingly mocking this sudden turn of events. The Secretary of State was momentarily stunned, his brows knitting together in confusion. Was there a power outage? His voice broke the silence, tinged with disbelief. The person in charge was also taken aback, his eyes wide with terror. Quick, go check what's happening. His voice was slightly shaky. The engineering team rushed in, their faces serious, holding various testing equipment. After a tense round of inspections, preliminary results were in. One engineer, sweating profusely, reported, Mr. Secretary, our checks indicate that our satellites seem to have suffered impacts from cosmic rays, resulting in malfunctions. The secretary's expression darkened instantly as he glared at the person in charge, fury evident in his eyes. What the hell did you just say about our eyes? What's going on now? Are they blind? The person in charge was too frightened to respond, trembling slightly. The secretary turned to the engineer, demanding, when can it be fixed? His tone left no room for doubt. The person in charge hurriedly replied, there's no way to fix it, unless we bring the satellites down. The secretary's dissatisfaction deepened. Are you saying that all our satellites are broken and can't be repaired? His voice rose, the fury in his eyes almost consuming the person in charge. The person in charge quickly smiled and explained, please don't be upset, Mr. Secretary. The malfunctions are entirely due to the impact of cosmic rays. Once the cosmic rays dissipate, our satellites will naturally return to normal. The secretary finally breathed a sigh of relief, wiping non-existent sweat from his forehead. Why didn't you say so earlier? You had me worried sick. I thought they were all broken. However, just as the secretary finished speaking, the engineer suddenly interjected. The situation may not be as optimistic as we think. His voice was low and hoarse, like a heavy stone dropped on everyone's hearts. The person in charge and the secretary simultaneously turned to the engineer, asking, what do you mean? What is going on? The secretary's voice was a bit anxious. The engineer took a deep breath and slowly said, we tested all the satellites and found that this time the cosmic rays are unusually fierce. The secretary impatiently urged. And then? The engineer looked at him helplessly and finally had to state the truth. Then we found that all the satellites have fatal malfunctions. In other words, they are all unusable. At this revelation, everyone present was stunned. Unusable? All of them. There are hundreds of reconnaissance satellites. Are you telling me they've all been rendered useless just like that? The person in charge's eyes widened, his face filled with disbelief. He shouted, clearly, there were no issues from cosmic rays before. How could it be this severe this time? Is there an error in your detection? The engineer immediately became furious upon hearing this. Are you questioning our professionalism? If that's the case, you can certainly look for another engineering team. Without saying another word, the person in charge quickly left the room, his flustered figure appearing somewhat comical in the corridor. He indeed went to find another engineering team to check the situation. Soon, a well-known engineer in the industry arrived with his team. When they first arrived, they still had a hint of relaxation and disdain on their faces. How could cosmic rays possibly destroy our satellites? They must have made a mistake. Upon hearing the engineer's words, the person in charge displayed a faint smile, as if he had found a savior. However, as this engineering team began their serious work, the atmosphere gradually became tense. They operated the detection equipment skillfully, and their focused expressions grew more serious over time. After what felt like dozens of minutes, the confidence on the engineer's face slowly faded, replaced by an increasingly grave expression. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, his brows furrowed tightly, and the originally relaxed look in his eyes turned filled with worry. How could this happen? The engineer murmured, his hands trembling slightly, the detection report in his grip feeling as heavy as lead. Chapter 222. God, you are biased. The previous engineer had been questioned about his professionalism. At this moment, seeing the astonished expressions of the engineers behind him, he couldn't help but curl his lips into a cold smile, his eyes full of disdain. Did we make a mistake? He scoffed. Humph. I think some people just want to believe it until they see the evidence for themselves. The later engineer, hearing these sharp words, showed a helpless expression. He had come with full confidence, thinking he might overturn the previous despairing conclusion. But after these careful tests, he too could only give up the last struggle. The person in charge was already anxious, disregarding the previous engineer's sarcasm. He hurriedly approached to ask about the situation. What is going on? Hurry up and tell me. His voice was a bit strained from anxiety. The engineer shrugged helplessly and said dejectedly, contact the rocket department and prepare to relaunch the satellite. The amount of electronic flow carried by this cosmic ray far exceeds our expectations. All key components of the detection satellites have suffered catastrophic damage without exception. Given the current situation, these satellites are completely beyond saving. We can only rebuild a new satellite system. Hearing all the engineers speak so decisively, the person in charge felt his heart sink to the bottom, as if gripped by an invisible hand, struggling to breathe. Shit. He couldn't help but curse. Why are we suffering such a natural disaster? Why is even God against us? Why is all of this happening? His eyes widened, filled with unwillingness and anger. The Secretary of State initially wanted to scold the engineers harshly. In his view, this was a matter of significant intelligence strategy for the nation. And now that it had turned out like this, someone had to take responsibility. What was even more frustrating was that this individual had just confidently told him that they would be the eyes of their nation. And now it had come to this. However, before he could unleash his anger, he suddenly thought about it and realized that the cosmic ray attack was indeed an uncontrollable factor, so he couldn't blame them entirely. In the end, he could only direct his pent-up anger towards a higher power. Indeed, even the higher power wasn't helping us anymore. What are we going to do about this? The Secretary of State looked frustrated, pacing back and forth. At that moment, an engineer seemed to have an epiphany and spoke up. Mr. Secretary, we are not the only ones affected. The satellites from the neighboring nation are so close to us. They must have been destroyed as well. Don't worry, we are all in the same boat. They won't be doing any better. Others echoed in agreement. Hearing this, the Secretary of State felt slightly relieved. He was about to say that it seemed the higher power was fair and wouldn't let only them suffer. But just then, the screen suddenly lit up without warning. In that instant, he was taken aback, his eyes widened in disbelief, muttering to himself. What is happening? Could it be that the satellite system has recovered? He quickly looked at the person in charge. However, the person in charge did not appear very pleased. He frowned and explained gravely. Mr. Secretary, I regret to inform you that this is a satellite we have temporarily deployed for other tasks to observe the situation here. I want to confirm whether this is a natural disaster or a man-made one. This situation is too suspicious to be left unexplained. The engineer, feeling confident, replied, although the electron flow contained in this cosmic ray is somewhat rare, it is still a normal phenomenon in the vast universe. Based on the information we have at the moment, it is undoubtedly a natural disaster. Moreover, there is absolutely no nation in the world that can simulate such cosmic rays. I can assure you. He spoke with such conviction, as if what he said was an undeniable truth. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the images displayed on the screen turned his face pale. The screen showed some satellites still operating normally, methodically orbiting the blue planet, executing their respective tasks, with their blinking signal lights seemingly mocking their current predicament. In contrast, their own satellites, while still orbiting the blue planet, had clearly gone off course, resembling a group of lost children aimlessly drifting in space, and those satellites appeared lifeless, clearly having completely malfunctioned. What they found unbearable was that the normally functioning satellites seemed to belong to the neighboring nation. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. The entire satellite department fell into a dead silence, with only the flickering lights on the screen mercilessly reflecting their shock and panic at that moment. The person in charge immediately shouted, his voice slightly cracking due to excessive excitement. Why are the satellites of that country fine, while ours are all destroyed? How is this possible? His eyes were wide open, filled with disbelief. The Secretary of State could no longer maintain his composure. He looked up at the sky and shouted, "Oh God, you are biased. You've lost your balance. Whose faith are you really representing?" His hands flailed in the air like a madman, filled with confusion and indignation over this sudden turn of events. Someone speculated, could it be that country is up to something? Why are their satellites fine while ours are broken? This is too coincidental to not raise suspicion. An engineer immediately refuted, I just said it couldn't be them. How could they possibly launch cosmic rays? Moreover, we retrieved the cosmic images before the satellite failures. And there was nothing unusual. If you insist it's because they launched cosmic rays from the ground, then I can only say you have quite the imagination. That is simply absurd. The person in charge, not willing to give up, asked, could it be that they invented some kind of cloaking device to launch the rays? The engineer shrugged helplessly. You have an even wilder imagination. How could that be possible? If such a device really existed, it would have caused a global sensation long ago. At that moment, a subordinate suddenly pointed at a satellite and said, look, that satellite, which is also malfunctioning, doesn't seem to belong to us. Chapter 223, The New Use of Space Mecha. When Lu Qingji received the message from Old Qin, he was in a brief state of relaxation after intense tension. Although they had completed the mission of destroying the enemy's satellites, Lu Qingji still felt something was off. Indeed, for soldiers like them, destroying a target felt more reassuring than just rendering it inoperative. At this moment, the calm and powerful voice of Old Qin came through the communicator. Little Lu, thank you for your hard work. The mission was executed well. The enemy's satellites are all incapacitated, and the task is successfully completed. I'll make a note of this achievement for you. Hearing that the mission was successfully completed, the tension that had been hanging over Lu Qingji finally eased. He let out a long sigh. However, one thing puzzled him. He asked through the communicator, Old Qin, I'm curious. How did you know that the enemy's satellites were incapacitated? From what I see, the satellites we've destroyed seem quite normal. What angle did you analyze to conclude they were down? His brows furrowed slightly, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. Old Qin chuckled and patiently explained. The people at the space agency told me that the enemy's satellites had clearly deviated from their orbits. You know that satellites operate in precisely calculated and strictly controlled orbits during normal operation. Any deviation must indicate a significant problem. From this, we can conclude that their satellite has malfunctioned. Lu Qingji listened and suddenly understood, nodding his head. So that's how it is. At this moment, Elder Qin suddenly continued. No. It's not just that. We can also determine that our satellite was mistakenly hit, confirming that the satellite in space has indeed suffered a catastrophic impact. Lu Qingji's eyes widened in disbelief, his voice unconsciously rising a few notches. What? Our satellite was also impacted? What is going on? His heart raced. A sense of unease washing over him. Elder Qin slowly said, the people at the space agency mean that the cosmic ray power simulated by our mech launch is too high and highly penetrating. And the rays can pass through the other side's satellite. Fortunately, we only have one satellite that was mistakenly hit. Lu Qingji was taken aback for a moment. Then he felt a wave of self-reproach, saying regretfully, this is all my responsibility. I've caused trouble for the country, and I'm very sorry. He clenched his fists, deeply frustrated by his oversight. Elder Qin chuckled. What are you doing? What else with the apologies? That satellite was nearing the end of its service life anyway. It was time for it to be decommissioned. Elder Qin spoke lightly, as if comforting a child who had made a mistake. Lu Qingji was still a bit worried. The main concern is that our satellite is now malfunctioning. If we need to launch a new satellite, it will require a rocket launch, which will incur costs. He understood that the country's investment in space was substantial, and every expenditure needed careful consideration. Elder Qin jokingly scolded. Little Lu, you usually work smartly. Why are you being foolish now? Do we still need to build rockets to launch satellites? Think about it. How did you get into space? Lu Qingji was taken aback at first, then quickly realized, slapping his forehead. Oh, I'm really being silly. We have space mechs now. We can directly carry the satellite and fly into space. This is so much easier. Excitement reignited in his eyes. Elder Qin nodded repeatedly. That's exactly what I mean. With Su Qin's help, we are no longer novices exploring the universe. We no longer need cumbersome rockets to reach space. We now have more advanced space equipment. Experts from the Space Department said they would equip the satellite with an automatic navigation system. Once in space, it will automatically fly to the designated orbit according to the preset program. You don't need to worry about the rest. I'll arrange for someone to handle it. Just focus on your mission. Hearing this good news, Lu Qingji felt completely relieved. A smile of comfort appeared on his face. Thank goodness for little Su. Having the space mech is really convenient. Elder Qin then prepared to hang up the phone, saying, I want to delay you from continuing your mission. With that, he ended the communication. Soon, Lu Qingji led the mech army to the southern sea area. After activating their cloaking devices, the mech seemed to blend into the air, completely disappearing from sight. At the same time, with a command, the mech army accelerated to their maximum speed, moving like lightning that tore through time and space. During their high-speed flight, the engines of the mechs emitted a deep, powerful roar, resembling an impassioned battle anthem. Before long, they arrived above the Longhang shipyard located in the southern sea area. From the high altitude, the shipyard appeared grand in scale, with massive ships under construction lying quietly in the docks like sleeping giants. Lu Qingji's expression became serious. He knew this mission was critical and that there could be no mistakes. He issued new orders to the mech army. Prepare for landing. At the Longheng shipyard, sunlight streamed through the windows of Commander Zhao Lao's office, creating a tranquil and harmonious atmosphere. Today, Zhao Lao had dressed meticulously, his usually sharp military demeanor somewhat softened. He wore a crisp military uniform, with every crease seemingly telling tales of past glories, and his neatly combed hair added a touch of solemnity to his appearance. Suddenly, the quiet was disrupted by hurried footsteps as a subordinate rushed in. Zhao Yong looked up, a questioning look in his eyes. Are they here? His voice was steady and strong, yet it couldn't hide the underlying anticipation. The subordinate quickly stood at attention and saluted, replying loudly, Yes, sir. They are downstairs. Zhao Lao nodded calmly and instinctively ran a hand through his slick hair, as if to present the best version of himself to the incoming guests. He then walked outside with steady steps. Upon reaching the ground floor, he saw several vehicles parked neatly, their doors opening one after another as many people emerged. They immediately spotted Zhao Yong, who was surrounded by a group, and greeted him enthusiastically. Hello, Commander. Their voices echoed loudly in the spacious lobby. The foremost individual, smiling, quickly approached and extended a hand to shake with Zhao Yong, his tone filled with respect. Commander, it's a pleasure to meet you. Zhao Yong also offered a warm smile, firmly shaking the other's hand, saying, I'm happy to meet you too, Director Zhang. The newcomers were none other than the staff from the Spring Festival Gala program. They had come to the Longheng shipyard to prepare for the upcoming Spring Festival Gala. It is known that the Spring Festival Gala is a grand live broadcast event aimed at the entire nation and even the world, making its importance self-evident. Therefore, the production team usually starts preparations long in advance, with some even rehearsing 6 months ahead to present a flawless audiovisual feast to the audience on New Year's Eve. However, this time, the military had made a last-minute decision, and the task they proposed was quite significant. Even more so, there are plans to feature the military's prepared program as the grand finale of the Spring Festival Gala. With that, Director Zhang hurriedly brought his team over without delay. In fact, he was quite curious about the program prepared by the military, especially since it was to be the final act. What kind of performance could possibly carry such an important responsibility? It couldn't just be the officers and soldiers wishing everyone a happy new year. Director Zhang pondered to himself, thinking that such a finale might not have a great effect. After all, the audience has developed a bit of aesthetic fatigue towards the Spring Festival Gala. In the past, the gala was filled with popular sketches and various wonderful performances that could bring joy to the audience for an entire year. But now, it seems the gala has gradually leaned towards education, with entertainment becoming less important. The audience has had enough of various forms of education in their daily studies and work. Who would want to sit in front of the TV on New Year's Eve to listen to lengthy speeches about principles? Therefore, Director Zhang thought that this time, he must present something different for the audience. At this moment, he was contemplating a bold idea and wanted to discuss it with Zhao Yong. However, before doing so, he first asked Zhao Yong in advance, Chief, I've heard that you want to use our program as the grand finale for New Year's Eve. I'm quite curious. Do you mean for our officers and soldiers to wish the audience a happy new year? Director Zhang asked with a smile, his eyes revealing a hint of curiosity and anticipation. Upon hearing this, Zhao Yong burst into laughter, his laughter hearty and loud. Wishing people a happy new year? What kind of program is that? Just thinking about it is boring. Director Zhang also laughed, secretly feeling that this chief was quite straightforward, not one to engage in nonsense. And dealing with him would definitely be refreshing. After the laughter, Director Zhang seemed to have made up his mind and suddenly said, I have a great idea. Can the chief listen to it? Of course. Zhao Yong replied without hesitation. Come, let us go to my office and have a good chat. Thus, the group headed to Zhao Yong's office. The office was simply yet solemnly decorated, with military maps and the unit's honorary medals hanging on the walls, telling the extraordinary past of its owner. Once they were seated, Director Zhang cleared his throat and began to express his thoughts. The current situation is quite turbulent, isn't it? I've noticed that our populace is feeling a significant lack of security, especially in this environment of volatile energy prices. People are afraid that the flames of war might reach our own territory. So, I propose at this point, Director Zhang paused, feeling a bit anxious about whether to continue, as his idea was somewhat bold, and he wasn't sure how Zhao Yong would react. Zhao Yong seemed to see through his thoughts, smiled slightly, and gestured for him to continue. No worries, just say whatever you want. There are no outsiders here. Hearing this, Director Zhang nodded with a smile and continued. I propose that we showcase our powerful weapons. For example, at the end of last year, we scared off all the intruders in the White Sea region with a certain type of warship. This fully showcased the combat power and strength of our military. I believe it definitely provided our citizens with a strong sense of security. Moreover, I think that after the recent events in the White Sea, many people must be very curious about our warships, especially since they were able to intimidate 2 aircraft carrier battle groups. Zhao Yong was stunned upon hearing this, his mouth slightly agape, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Director Zhang had been observing Zhao Yong's reaction while speaking and noticed that Zhao Yong seemed taken aback by his inspiration. So he seized the opportunity to ask, what do you think of this idea? Zhao Yong nodded repeatedly, a smile of approval appearing on his face. Great. This idea is wonderful and can even be said to align perfectly with our thoughts. Hearing this, Director Zhang felt overjoyed, But before he could celebrate for too long, Zhao Yong continued. However, the issue is that the strategic vessel you mentioned is not powerful enough. If we want to give the public a strong sense of security, we must bring out our big treasure. Director Zhang was taken aback, pondering to himself, could the big treasure be the special weapon? After a moment of hesitation, he furrowed his brows and said, it could work, but I feel it's not shocking enough. The visual impact is lacking. Warships still look more impressive. Don't be fooled by how small those ships appeared on the live broadcast. In reality, when seen up close, those ships are quite large, and the sense of pressure and shock they bring is very strong. Therefore, Director Zhang thought that showcasing the warships might yield better results. Zhao Yong was a bit confused by Director Zhang's words, thinking to himself, this old Zhang doesn't he even know what it is and says it's not shocking enough. He couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Isn't the aerospace carrier more impressive than the strategic vessel? Zhao Yong understood that Director Zhang probably misunderstood. But he didn't elaborate further. Instead, he turned to call over his assistant. Shortly after, an assistant hurried over, holding a stack of confidentiality agreements that needed to be signed. The assistant looked serious as he distributed the agreements to everyone. Everyone understood the importance of the confidentiality agreements. Considering they pertain to military matters that certainly shouldn't be leaked easily. However, when they saw the punishment clauses written in the agreements, they couldn't help but feel a chill. According to past practices, any leak of confidential information would generally be treated as espionage, but the punishment here was actually execution, which shocked everyone. Wow, is this confidentiality really that terrifying? Someone couldn't help but murmur softly. They instinctively looked at Zhao Yong, who still wore a kind smile, but somehow, to them, that smile seemed a bit frightening. Chapter 225. Let the photographer wear the mech suit. Zhao Yong seemed to sense their dilemma and immediately waved his hand, speaking in a gentle tone. Everyone, don't worry. This confidentiality agreement is only valid for 1 month. As soon as the clock strikes midnight on the Spring Festival Gala, it will automatically expire. As long as you complete the filming task diligently, we won't make things difficult for you. On the contrary, we will provide any assistance we can. Upon hearing Zhao Yong's words, the group exchanged glances and said nothing further, instead nodding in agreement and accepting the agreement. After all, this was a rare opportunity. Although bound by the confidentiality agreement, being part of such an important finale preparation for the Spring Festival Gala was an honor. Once the confidentiality agreement was signed, Zhao Yong personally led them to a massive base. As they walked, everyone was astonished by the scale of the base. The facility was entirely modular in design, and the first thing that caught their eye was a huge square workshop, covering at least several thousand acres, simply astonishing in size. Next to this enormous workshop were many smaller square workshops. Though referred to as small, each still covered at least 100 acres, equally impressive. Director Zhang was particularly taken aback by the sight. His eyes widened in surprise. Curiosity bubbled within him as he wondered what could possibly be inside that giant workshop. Could it be a nuclear weapon storage facility? Were all the nuclear weapons stored here? Filled with curiosity, he knew he had to remain silent at that moment. He absolutely couldn't ask any questions, especially after just signing the strict confidentiality agreement. Zhao Yong seemed to notice Director Zhang's curious gaze. He paused, pointed to the largest workshop, and said to everyone, what you need to film is in there. Come with me. With a mix of apprehension and curiosity, the group followed Zhao Yong into the vast workshop. Upon entering, they were momentarily confused, instinctively surveying their surroundings, but finding nothing particularly remarkable. The workshop was empty, with only some basic support structures and nothing particularly eye-catching. At that moment, Zhao Yong smiled and encouraged them to look up. They followed his cue and examined the ceiling, noticing it seemed somewhat unusual, as if made of metal, but beyond that, there was nothing particularly significant to discern. Zhao Yong, understanding that these inexperienced individuals were astonished, smiled and signaled to his subordinate. The subordinate understood immediately and issued an order, causing the ceiling of the facility to slowly open. To their surprise, they realized that what they had thought was the actual ceiling was, in fact, above the structure. As the ceiling opened, sunlight streamed in like golden swords, illuminating the workshop. The structure that had previously appeared as the ceiling began to rise slowly above them. As it ascended higher and higher, the people below grew increasingly bewildered. Their pupils dilated gradually, mouths agape, and the confusion in their eyes was soon replaced by an overwhelming shock. Boom! When that object reached a height of about 100 meters and its appearance was fully revealed to the crowd, it felt as if a thunderclap had exploded in their minds. They stood frozen, as if under a spell, unable to move. Is this a UFO? A spacecraft? Our country has actually developed a spacecraft. Some muttered in disbelief, their voices trembling with excitement. No, to be precise, this should be called a space mothership. But this is something straight out of science fiction. It had only existed as a concept until now. I can't believe we've actually developed it. Another person exclaimed, eyes sparkling with excitement and pride. Someone else, overwhelmed with emotion, stuttered, quick, punch me. Ouch, it hurts. I'm so excited. I can't believe we've created such a massive thing. Some were so ecstatic they became incoherent, even asking a companion to punch them to confirm they weren't dreaming. No wonder the penalties for leaking confidential agreements are so severe. This is a space mothership. If this gets out, the consequences would be dire. The gasps of astonishment echoed in the director's ears, each exclamation like a thunderclap. pulling him back to reality from the shock he was immersed in. He slowly raised his head, his gaze once again fixed on the colossal space mothership above, his eyes still filled with undeniable astonishment. The director began to question whether this was all a dream, as the sight before him was beyond imagination. Something that had only existed in science fiction novels and movies was now vividly present before his eyes. He instinctively pinched himself, a sharp pain confirming the reality. He gasped, realizing that this sensation was a clear indication that everything was real, not a mere illusion. In that moment, he truly understood why Zhao Yong had said that the Longwei-class strategic ship was not shocking enough, and that they needed to bring out something more impressive. He had previously thought it would be a mushroom egg, as everyone believed that was the ultimate trump card of various nations, a highly deterrent presence. But he never expected that the country had something even more formidable. This massive object was indeed far more astonishing than the Longwei-class strategic ship. Moreover, upon reflection, filming it required no special skills. Just capturing its imposing, sci-fi appearance as it is would be enough to create a stunning visual experience for the audience. This was simply a natural and unparalleled visual feast. Just as they were still immersed in the shock brought by the space mothership, Zhao Yong's calm and powerful voice suddenly rang out. So, Director Zhang, do you have confidence in capturing it well? You are one of the top directors in our country. And I believe that with your skills, you will be able to create a video with great program effects. Zhao Yong looked at him with anticipation, fully aware of the significance of this year's Spring Festival Gala's closing act. And he knew that the director's professional ability was one of the key factors in achieving a perfect presentation. Director Zhang came back to his senses, his expression turning serious as he said solemnly, filming it doesn't require too much technique. Techniques seem superfluous in its presence. In my view, it's enough to present it completely. Director Zhang originally wanted to say to shock the audience, but felt that such a statement might not be appropriate in this context, as it involved a serious matter concerning significant national scientific achievements. So he quickly rephrased it, saying, it's enough to astonish the whole world. His eyes sparkled with excitement and determination, already beginning to visualize the filming scenes and processes in his mind. Zhao Yong listened and smiled with satisfaction. He could clearly sense Director Zhang's confidence, which gave him more assurance about the success of this closing act. However, at that moment, Director Zhang seemed to remember something and spoke up. By the way, Chief, we might need some assistance. Zhao Yong maintained a calm demeanor and asked, what kind of help? After pondering briefly and organizing his thoughts, Director Zhang said, we need a helicopter to film the overall view of this aerospace battleship. After all, its size is so enormous that filming from different angles and heights is necessary to fully showcase its grandeur. A helicopter is relatively flexible and can move freely in the air to capture various ideal shooting perspectives. Zhao Yong furrowed his brow slightly in thought, and then replied, filming with a helicopter is too rigid and noisy. Let me find some other equipment for you. It will definitely help you shoot well. The crowd was momentarily stunned by Zhao Yong's words. In their understanding, a helicopter was the best equipment they could think of for filming such a large object. Could there be other equipment? This left them puzzled, exchanging glances filled with confusion. Just as they were wondering, a faint mechanical sound was heard, and soon, 10 pieces of powered exosuits appeared before them. The high-tech appearance, smooth lines, and the subtly shimmering metallic shells instantly captivated everyone's attention. Looking at these suits that seemed to come from a future world, the crowd was even more bewildered, completely unable to understand why Zhao Yong had brought these things. Then, Zhao Yong calmly asked the photographer to try one on. Although the photographer was filled with doubts, he carefully put on the exosuit under everyone's watchful eyes. As soon as the exosuit was fully fitted, a miracle happened. Under the gaze of the crowd, the photographer took off in an instant, soaring into the sky. The speed was so astonishing, it was as if a lightning bolt had streaked across the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it had already soared into the air. Everyone was almost petrified on the spot, their eyes wide open, mouths agape as if they could fit an egg inside, their faces filled with disbelief. What on earth is this? It can actually fly just by putting it on? Isn't this becoming a superhero? Our country actually has such high-tech equipment? Someone couldn't help but let out an expletive, their voice slightly altered due to overwhelming shock. Wow. Has our country unknowingly become this impressive? Zhao Yong looked at Director Zhang and asked with a smile, Director Zhang, wouldn't it be more convenient for the photographer to wear the mech suit instead of using a helicopter? Director Zhang finally snapped out of his extreme shock and nodded repeatedly, excitedly saying, not just convenient, it's incredibly convenient. In fact, in my opinion, we don't even need the aerial mothership for the finale. This mech alone is sufficient. Moreover, this thing is agile and silent in flight and can easily adjust angles, ensuring excellent shooting results. At this moment, Director Zhang could hardly contain his desire to start filming immediately. Countless exciting shooting scenes seemed to flash through his mind, and he was eager to begin planning the upcoming filming content right away. However, just as Director Zhang was full of anticipation and ready to showcase his skills, Zhao Yong waved his hand and said, don't rush, we're not done yet. We still have the big guy coming. Director Zhang was taken aback, his eyes wide with disbelief, his voice trembling as he asked, what? There's more? Chapter 226, The Space Mech Legion Lands. At this moment, Director Zhang was filled with astonishment. To him, mechs and aerial motherships were already extremely terrifying military weapons. Looking around the world, no country, no, to be precise, It should be said that no country could possibly possess such a heaven-defying manufacturing technology. Even those known for their technological and military strength would certainly not have it. This level of technology had surpassed reality, stepping into the realm of science fiction. If any other country could produce a weapon of this sci-fi level, Director Zhang would be utterly in awe. Thus, as he pondered this, he figured that the big guy Zhao mentioned was probably something else. It shouldn't be another jaw-dropping sci-fi level weapon like the mech or the aerial mothership. After all, this was already shocking enough. What could be more powerful than this? Just then, one of Zhao Yong's subordinates walked over with steady steps, arriving in front of Zhao Yong and respectfully reporting, "Sir, General Liu has arrived." Hearing this, Zhao Yong smiled slightly, a hint of satisfaction and anticipation in his expression, and said, "Perfect timing." He then turned to Director Zhang, his eyes glinting with a hint of mystery. "Come, let us go take a look at our big guy." Director Zhang felt a surge of anticipation in his heart. Although he suspected that this large object might not be a sci-fi level weapon, the expression on Zhao Lao's face made him think that there might still be some unexpected surprises. So he followed Zhao Yong and the group towards a wide plaza. Upon arriving at the plaza, everyone looked around but found nothing at all. This left them all staring at each other in confusion. Didn't they say they had arrived? Why was there nothing here? Someone couldn't help but mutter quietly. Zhao Yong appeared calm. He waved his hand and said, "Don't rush, let's wait a bit longer." In fact, he was also a bit puzzled, staring intently at the sky. Seeing Zhao Lao's demeanor, everyone followed his gaze upward. About half a minute later, suddenly, a voice echoed from the void without warning, as if it came from a distant horizon, yet it resonated clearly in everyone's ears. "Zhao Lao, why are there so many people? Is it appropriate for us to appear now?" This unexpected sound startled everyone. They immediately looked around in panic, their eyes wide with fear. What the heck? Who is talking? Seeing ghosts in broad daylight, someone couldn't help but curse, their voice slightly cracking from excessive tension. At this moment, Director Zhang was also quite bewildered. He instinctively moved closer to Zhao Lao and whispered, "What is going on? Chief, this is too strange." Zhao Lao slightly turned and patted Director Zhang's shoulder, signaling him not to panic, then shouted at the sky, "It's fine. These people are from the Spring Festival Gala production team cooperating with us to film the program. They have all signed confidentiality agreements. You may appear normally." Received. Lu Qingji's voice resounded again, imbued with the decisiveness and efficiency of a soldier. As the voice faded, an astonishing scene unfolded. In the sky, 50 space mechs simultaneously deactivated their cloaking functions. In that instant, the previously empty and clear sky was suddenly filled as if it had been recklessly occupied by a legion of towering steel giants. Each of these 50 space mechs exuded an imposing presence, radiating a chilling metallic luster as if forged from millennia-old polar ice. Their enormous bodies, with sharp and smooth lines, were infused with futuristic design elements, resembling war machines that had traveled from a distant future, carrying an air of chilling lethality. At this moment, they were neatly arranged in the vast sky, like an iron army awaiting inspection. Even just hovering there silently, unmoving, they emanated a terrifying aura capable of crushing everything and overwhelming all. The momentum surged like a tangible storm, centered around the mecha group, sweeping out in all directions with overwhelming force, seemingly intent on enveloping everything in the world under this suffocating pressure. Below, everyone, even the seasoned General Zhao, who had faced many battles and seen countless storms, couldn't help but gasp at the shocking sight before them. Not to mention the others. Each of them stood with their mouths agape, their eyes filled with endless astonishment. The level of shock was no less than when they first laid eyes on the aerial mothership. Such a large number of space mechas appeared before them in perfect formation, their intimidating presence reaching an extreme. These mechas, regardless of which nation's airspace they entered, would undoubtedly incite extreme panic among its citizens. This was not an exaggeration. Even the most arrogant entities would likely be frightened to their knees upon witnessing such a display. Director Zhang finally regained his composure, his eyes wide as he murmured to himself. "So the big guy that General Zhao mentioned earlier is this giant mecha. Not just one, but dozens of them." The sense of oppression was enough to leave anyone stunned. The crowd stood frozen in place, awestruck by the magnificent sight, struggling to come back to their senses. It wasn't until all the mechas had landed steadily that their clarity began to return. "General Zhao, I am here to transport the mechas." Lu Qingji strode forward, saluted Zhao Yong sharply, and spoke with a booming voice. Zhao Yong, snapping back to reality, nodded seriously. But his gaze couldn't help but drift back to the mechas behind them, revealing a sense of pride and emotion as he remarked, "It seems we now have the capability to conquer the universe." Hearing this, Lu Qingji turned to look at the mechas, nodding in agreement, and said, "It's all thanks to that kid." As he spoke, he began to scan around Zhao Yong, but after looking around, he noticed the absence of Su Chun and couldn't help but frown, muttering, "Where's that brat? Isn't he at the shipyard?" Chapter 227, New Intelligence from the Dragon Nation. Zhao Yong chuckled at Lu Qingji's inquiry about Su Chun's whereabouts. "That kid is probably sleeping in. He has been so busy with various projects lately that now that everything is wrapping up, it's time for him to take a good rest." Lu Qingji nodded in deep agreement, echoing Zhao Yong's words with a sense of emotion. Indeed, it's time for him to rest. That kid has really been working himself to the bone. This seemingly ordinary conversation was captured word for word by Director Zhang, who couldn't help but feel puzzled about who this breath they were talking about was. How could all of this be attributed to him? It sounded as if the mechas and the aerial mothership were all his doing. However, he didn't take it to heart, as this matter was far removed from his area of expertise. The key was that even if he wanted to delve deeper, the confidentiality agreement made it impossible to ask too many questions. It was better not to know what he shouldn't, to avoid getting into trouble. At this moment, Lu Qingji also noticed Director Zhang standing aside, and Zhao Yong smiled as he introduced the two. Lu Qingji extended his hand warmly and shook hands briefly with Director Zhang, saying, "Director Zhang, I've long admired your reputation. This time, the finale of the Spring Festival Gala depends entirely on you. You must perfectly showcase the talents of all of us." Zhao Yong nodded in agreement, and then, with a serious expression, said, "Old Zhang, now that all the weapons and military equipment that need to make an appearance are ready, it's your turn to shine. This is a daunting task, but I believe with your skills, you will definitely accomplish it beautifully." Director Zhang's face was filled with a serious and earnest expression. He shook Lu Qingji's hand firmly and nodded at Zhao Yong, stating seriously, "Rest assured, leaders, I, Zhang, will not fail in my mission. I guarantee that this year's Spring Festival Gala will be the most spectacular one in the history of our country. By then, audiences nationwide and even around the world will be left in awe by our performance." Zhao Yong and Lu Qingji exchanged smiles, nodding in satisfaction, their eyes full of anticipation for the success of this Spring Festival Gala finale. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the conference room was as oppressive as before a storm, almost suffocating. The president, sitting in the main seat, had a particularly grim expression, his face dark as if it could drip water. Just moments ago, he had received the bad news from the satellite department, which hit him like a bombshell, causing turmoil in his mind. This president, who always considered himself a loyal believer, was now engulfed in extreme self-doubt. Hundreds of satellites monitoring the country had all been attacked by cosmic rays, which was undoubtedly a devastating blow to their intelligence collection system. From the detailed report of the satellite department, he learned that while cosmic rays occasionally caused some malfunctions in the past, the extent of the damage had never been this severe. Previously, the satellites would return to normal operation once the cosmic rays passed, but this time, the situation was entirely different. All satellites were completely destroyed under the onslaught of these intense rays, with no possibility of repair. The president was filled with frustration, knowing that the direct economic losses from this wave of radiation had reached nearly $100 billion. This was no small amount. Just throwing it out there could stir significant waves internationally. And this was just the direct loss. The time and effort spent to build this massive satellite system, along with the enormous financial costs, were what truly pained him. It had taken countless researchers' efforts and a vast amount of national resources to establish it. And now it was all destroyed in an instant. How could he not feel heartbroken? But now, no matter how heartbroken it is, we must find a way to solve the problem. To rebuild a new satellite system requires even more investment, and in the current energy crisis, even a superpower like them feels this is a heavy burden that is hard to bear. After all, they do not have advanced space technology like some other countries. Those countries can now directly send satellites into space using advanced technology, while they still have to build rockets to launch satellites. And the gap between them is not small at all. After a moment of furious shouting and silent contemplation, the leader finally calmed down from the anger that nearly consumed him. He raised his head and fixed his gaze on the Secretary of State, his tone carrying a hint of questioning. Are we sure it's cosmic rays, and not some trickery from another nation? Nowadays, the leader feels a sense of paranoia. Any slight disturbance makes him suspect that there might be some hidden agenda at play. The Secretary of State had previously suspected the other nation as well, given its rapid development in recent years, which has made even established powers feel uneasy. However, after thorough investigation and analysis, his doubts had diminished significantly. Clearing his throat, he spoke slowly. I don't think it is the other nation. Based on the information we currently have, their satellites have also been affected by cosmic rays. From this perspective, it doesn't seem like it was intentional on their part. Hearing this, the leader did not dare to let his guard down. He furrowed his brows, a hint of skepticism in his eyes, and said, what if they deliberately used an aging satellite to stage this for us? That nation is becoming increasingly unpredictable. The Secretary of State pondered the leader's words for a moment, feeling that there was no need for them to do such a thing. He shook his head, looking somewhat helpless. To put it bluntly, with their current strength, they have no need to stage anything for us. Moreover, our engineers have stated that launching cosmic rays in this manner requires extremely advanced technology and theoretical support, and no country currently has the capability to achieve this. Therefore, I believe they are likely victims just like us. Could it be that they have developed something we don't know about? Just then, the door to the conference room was suddenly pushed open, and Smith's voice was heard. Everyone turned to look, discovering he had walked in from outside. Smith's appearance broke the previously tense atmosphere in the room, and all eyes instantly focused on him. The leader, seeing Smith, snorted coldly, his expression darkening further, and scolded. Do you know how late you are? Furthermore, as a member of our intelligence department, shouldn't you be the one to inform us if they have developed new equipment? Instead, you have the audacity to turn around and ask us, how is your intelligence work being conducted? Smith was left speechless after being reprimanded by the national leader, his face turning red and white in succession, feeling extremely embarrassed. He realized he had gotten himself into trouble. However, Being a clever person, he quickly changed the subject. Well, we have obtained new intelligence from a certain country. Chapter 228. Is Brother Long going to target the oppressor? The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. The senior officials were deeply worried about the troubles brought by the destruction of the satellite. Suddenly, hearing the director of the agency claim to have new intelligence from that country struck them like a bolt of lightning, shocking the Secretary of State. What? Have you really discovered new technological equipment from that country? The Secretary of State's eyes widened, his voice involuntarily rising, filled with disbelief. Upon hearing this, the others, already on edge, were startled, as if an invisible hand had suddenly gripped their hearts, leaving them frozen in place. Don't joke around. Someone couldn't help but shout. The mechs developed by that country previously wiped out the forces in the oil-rich nation. The scene was a one-sided crushing defeat, and the advanced equipment of the opposing forces was like paper in front of their mechs. And the strategic ships they developed before were incredibly powerful. One shot directly obliterated our overseas military base, leaving our two carrier battle groups too scared to confront them head-on, forcing a retreat in disgrace. Now you're telling me they've developed new equipment? Are you kidding us? As they spoke, their faces were filled with fear and helplessness, as if the advanced equipment continuously emerging from that country had become an inescapable nightmare for them. Yes, and it's only been a few years. First the mechs, then the strategic ships, and don't forget the room temperature superconductors. These astonishing achievements seem to come out like magic. Their technological advancements are just too rapid. It feels like they're playing on a different level, giving us old powers no chance to breathe. Someone echoed, their words dripping with sourness and concern. Noticing the astonished and even fearful reactions of the crowd, Smith thought to himself that he had been too abrupt, triggering such panic among them. He quickly waved his hands and said urgently, No, don't think of it in such a terrifying way. Even if that country is impressive, they can't possibly have developed something new again. Otherwise, I'd really suspect they have extraterrestrial assistance. You can't just make wild guesses based on what I said. I haven't even shared the specific intelligence yet. Everyone, please calm down, calm down. Hearing his words, the crowd seemed to grab hold of a lifeline, slowly exhaling. Their hearts that had been in their throats gradually settling back down. The national leader also returned to his original position, though his brow remained tightly furrowed, and his expression was still very serious. It's not surprising that they had such a reactive response. In recent years, the advancements in the field of technology in a certain country have been remarkably rapid, almost as if their technology tree has been enchanted, skyrocketing continuously. A series of cutting-edge technological achievements have emerged, leaving those countries that have always regarded themselves as technological powerhouses far behind. How could this not cause them to feel anxious? Furthermore, the remarks made by a certain individual earlier were too easy to associate with the possibility that this country might have developed new and more intimidating weaponry. After all, this country has already surprised them many times before, each time with something capable of overturning the battlefield dynamics. At this moment, the Secretary of State wiped the beads of sweat that had appeared on his forehead, secretly relieved that this country did not seem to have come up with any shocking new equipment as they had imagined. He composed himself and said to the individual, Please share the new intelligence you have brought. Don't keep us in suspense. Everyone is eager to hear. As he spoke, he took out a handkerchief and gently wiped his forehead, noticing that a small area of the cloth had become damp from sweat. Seeing this, the individual quickly took his seat and pulled out a stack of documents from his briefcase, distributing the obtained intelligence to everyone present. As the attendees received the information and began to read it carefully, puzzled expressions appeared on their faces, filled with confusion, as if they were confronted with an extremely perplexing riddle. The individual then cleared his throat and stated, Our latest intelligence indicates that this country will close its entry and exit channels around the time of their spring festival, which coincides with their New Year's Eve. To be honest, I find this intelligence quite baffling. I can't figure out what this country is up to. This action is too strange. Upon hearing this, the Secretary of State furrowed his brow, squinting slightly. After a moment of contemplation, he said, Could it be that this country has something it needs to keep secret? But how is that directly related to shutting down entry and exit channels? The president, seated at the head of the table, with his hands clasped, gazed deeply at everyone and slowly said, We must continue to closely monitor this country's movements. They are definitely planning something significant this time, possibly indicating that they are reaching a breaking point. His tone carried an inexplicable certainty, as if he had already perceived the deeper meaning behind this country's actions. Upon hearing this, everyone turned their attention to the president, their eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation, eager to hear his detailed thoughts. Mr. President, please share your insights. Have you noticed something? Someone couldn't help but ask. The president straightened up slightly, his expression serious as he replied, Do you all remember the incident in the South China Sea? Upon hearing this, another individual instinctively interjected, Are you referring to the time when our aircraft fleet was completely wiped out? The president shot him a glare and retorted impatiently, It wasn't even certain that it was this country that initiated the attack. How can you call it a confrontation? Speaking of this makes my head ache. Is your agency just sitting idle? Until now, we still haven't identified the traitor responsible for the complete defeat of our aircraft formation. It's truly frustrating. Upon hearing this, Smith felt an intense regret, wishing he could slap himself for speaking up. Had he known, he wouldn't have said a word. And now he had drawn the ire of the leader. The Secretary of State, noticing that the atmosphere might be disrupted by unrelated matters, quickly redirected the conversation back to the intelligence, saying, "Mr. President, are you referring to the earlier confrontation with a certain country in the southern waters? That was probably 7 or 8 years ago." His reminder prompted everyone to recall the event, nodding in acknowledgement. The president nodded in agreement, speaking more seriously. That confrontation was the most likely point of conflict between our two nations, and the situation was extremely tense. During those days, the other side, just like now, had closed their entry and exit passages. Upon hearing this, everyone suddenly realized, as if a lightning bolt had flashed through their minds, that the country behind this intelligence might indeed be preparing for significant actions again. This made them all alert, as if an invisible hand had quietly reached for their throats, ready to tighten at any moment. "Mr. President, are you implying that this country might once again engage in conflict with us?" The Secretary of State suddenly spoke up. "Or perhaps they're preparing to take action against us." The Secretary's words fell like a heavy stone, creating ripples in the calm waters of everyone's minds. Instantly, waves of anxiety surged within them. The implication of his statement startled them all, as expressions of fear and concern mingled on their faces. Previously, the country had been forced to close their entry and exit passages due to circumstances. But now, they were closing them voluntarily. Was this a sign of an imminent offensive? Someone couldn't help but voice their trembling thoughts, the sound echoing in the quiet conference room like a warning bell for war. Hearing this, everyone fell into deep thought, involuntarily beginning to empathize with the situation. If advanced mechs and strategic ships had been developed by us, we would undoubtedly be much bolder than the current state of that country. With such advanced weapons, we would have provoked other nations long ago to fill our pockets, rather than keeping a low profile like they do. One person, flushed with excitement, spoke with a gleam of greed and fervor in his eyes. And what about that country? After possessing weapons that could change the world's landscape, they acted as if those capabilities didn't exist, continuing their routine as if nothing had changed. They had questioned multiple times why that country could endure so much. With such powerful weapons, why not utilize their value instead of waiting for them to become outdated and useless? This seemed utterly incomprehensible to them. Now, it appeared that they were no longer willing to endure. Someone murmured softly, their words laced with a hint of tension. Smith listened to the ongoing discussions and couldn't help but want to speak up. He furrowed his brow, looking perplexed as he said, "But the nation is currently facing an energy crisis. Do they really dare to initiate a war? Don't their mechs and warships need energy to operate? Waging war at this time is like dancing on a tightrope. It's extremely dangerous. Once energy runs out, those advanced weapons will be unusable, and internal turmoil due to energy shortages is bound to happen. They surely wouldn't want to see such a scenario." The Secretary of State, upon hearing Smith's words, shook his head slightly, his expression serious as he replied, "You underestimate them too much. If they truly want to wage war, they wouldn't need to engage in a prolonged conflict. With their current strength, if they wish, they could defeat their enemies in no more than a month. Of course, that applies to other nations. If they were to confront us, it would take them at least half a year. As for the energy issue, they can maintain their combat powers simply by continuously plundering energy resources." At this point, the Secretary paused, his brow slightly furrowed, as if he thought of something else. However, he suddenly added, "But this approach carries significant risks. After all, we possess nuclear weapons. If we are pushed too far, we could reset the world. They may not want to bear such risks. To this, I have another hypothesis." The Secretary's words acted like a magnet, instantly drawing everyone's attention to him. The President, perplexed by the complex situation, perked up at the mention of the Secretary's additional speculation, focusing intently on what he had to say next. The Secretary slowly scanned the room, confidence gleaming in his eyes, and began, "Do you remember the intelligence we received earlier? They have developed superconductors and are constructing a nationwide large-scale power network. I suspect they might be about to activate superconducting transmission circuits. I've noticed that they have a habit of choosing so-called auspicious days for significant events. It's very possible they are planning to initiate the superconducting transmission circuits right before the Spring Festival, hoping to boost national confidence in this way." Smith's eyes lit up at the Secretary's words, as if he had suddenly grasped a key piece of information. He quickly said, "According to your logic, they would be even less likely to start a war around the Spring Festival. After all, it's a very festive time, and they would feel it brings bad luck. Thus, this action is likely related to room temperature superconductivity." Hearing this, President Biden nodded, his previously furrowed brow gradually relaxing, a look of realization flashing in his eyes. He suddenly felt enlightened, sensing that the Secretary's words made a lot of sense. The closure of entry and exit points by the nation might very well be related to their earlier breakthrough in room temperature superconducting technology. The Spring Festival is indeed a day worth celebrating, and announcing good news on such an important occasion would be a double blessing. For a certain country, they have always enjoyed this kind of spectacle. The leader of that country couldn't help but feel that his deductions were correct, a slight smirk appearing on his lips as he reveled in his own cleverness. In his view, he had completely grasped the thoughts of the other nation. He let out a cold laugh, secretly thinking, although they aim to save energy through room temperature superconducting technology to alleviate the energy crisis, the energy saved during transmission is hardly significant compared to the enormous energy gap they face. As they say, it's like a drop in the bucket. Upon hearing the leader's words, the room erupted in laughter. The once heavy and oppressive atmosphere in the conference room vanished without a trace, replaced by excitement and joy. With everyone's faces beaming as if victory was just around the corner. They believed that the other nation had seemingly fallen into a desperate situation, while they were on the brink of triumph. At that moment, the Secretary of State suddenly brightened, a mysterious smile appearing on his face. Everyone noticed his unusual demeanor and turned to look at him. The leader asked curiously, "Secretary, what is on your mind?" The secretary calmly smiled and looked back at everyone, saying, "I have an idea that could strike at the heart of that nation." At this, everyone's eyes widened in unison. Seeing the secretary's composed expression, tinged with confidence, the leader became intrigued about his idea. "Please, share your thoughts." The secretary cleared his throat and began, "What if we were to announce ahead of time that they are using room temperature superconducting materials for power transmission? Wouldn't that strike a blow to them?" His voice echoed in the conference room, each word like a stone thrown into water, instantly creating ripples in everyone's minds. Initially stunned, the group quickly regained their composure, a flicker of surprise passing through their eyes. "This is a secret of theirs. If we leak it, it would definitely hit them hard," someone exclaimed excitedly, their voice slightly trembling with enthusiasm. Once this news spreads, the world would likely erupt in chaos. They had actually conquered room temperature superconductivity and were using this technology to build power networks. The impact of such an announcement would be like an atomic bomb explosion, generating a commotion beyond imagination. Most importantly, they had been quietly profiting without sharing such advanced technology with the global community, which was incredibly selfish. Perhaps they could use global public opinion to pressure them into sharing the technology with us. Another person chimed in, his eyes gleaming with greed, as if he could already envision the scenario where the country, under global public opinion pressure, would have to surrender its room temperature superconducting technology. "Sharing is out of the question. What really makes me happy is seeing them face difficulties. Haha, this country always frustrates us, and it's time they experience some hardship too." Others nearby echoed in delight. Everyone expressed strong support for the Secretary of State's idea, but that wasn't all the secretary had in mind. After a brief pause, a glimmer of cunning crossed his eyes as he continued, "Moreover, aren't they supposed to close their borders around the Spring Festival? We should schedule a state visit during that time and see how they respond." "That's a good idea," someone immediately responded. "They'll definitely be torn between sticking to their border closure plan or refusing our visit." At this moment, the president, who had been deep in thought at the head of the table, frowned slightly and said uncertainly, "What if they refuse our state visit? This isn't a joke. If they don't play along, we could be left in an awkward position." The Secretary of State, however, waved his hand confidently and said, "They won't. Even if they want to go to war, pre-war communications can provide insights into everyone's strengths and weaknesses. They wouldn't easily pass up this opportunity." After hearing the secretary's analysis, everyone nodded in agreement. After careful consideration, they decided to proceed according to the secretary's plan. Just thinking about the upcoming chance to thoroughly annoy that country filled them with immense joy, as if the long-suppressed emotions had found an outlet. And each person was immersed in the excitement of creating trouble for that country. The joint conference was held under the chairmanship of a certain country. Usually, the conference center is bustling with representatives from various countries, creating a lively atmosphere. However, this time, the situation was somewhat different. The venue was noticeably quieter, with about 20 to 30 of countries absent. This made the overall atmosphere of the conference feel somewhat strange. The representative from that country, Gu Chuanwen, attended the meeting with a calm demeanor, dressed in a sharp suit, walking with steady and powerful steps that exuded the composure and confidence of a major country representative. The representative from a neighboring country, noticing the sparsely populated venue, couldn't help but feel puzzled. He leaned closer to Gu Chuanwen and quietly asked, "Why do I feel like there are significantly fewer representatives at this conference? This is unusual. This has never happened before." Gu Chuanwen replied calmly, "It should be related to the energy crisis. I've heard that many countries have gone bankrupt due to its effects. Although no one publicly knows who caused the energy crisis, everyone is well aware that it's definitely connected to that country. Those bankrupt small nations also have their pride and directly refuse to attend this meeting. Anyway, they are just small countries, and that country doesn't really care." His voice was not loud, but every word was clearly heard by the representative from the bear country, making him nod slightly. The meeting officially commenced, and the representative from the mentioned country slowly walked onto the stage, wearing what seemed to be a friendly smile. Addressing the representatives from various countries below, "Hello everyone. Today, I have good news that I want to share with you. A piece of news that concerns all of humanity and is significant for us." His words immediately sparked a heated discussion among the audience, the buzzing sound resembling a swarm of bees. The bear country representative scoffed softly and whispered to Gu Chuanwen, "Will the mentioned country share good news with us? Unless they are the biggest beneficiaries, who would believe their nonsense? Whoever does is just part of their agenda." Gu Chuanwen did not respond, merely raising an eyebrow. He was quite interested in the so-called good news from the mentioned country and wanted to see what they were really up to. The representative from the mentioned country observed the lively discussion below, a faint smile appearing on his lips. The more they talked, the more excited he became, like a magician relishing the audience's anticipation. Once the noise in the venue subsided a bit, he continued, "The good news is that we have achieved a breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity technology." As soon as this was said, the previously noisy venue fell silent, as if time had stopped at that moment. The representatives from various countries widened their eyes in disbelief, all gazing intently at the representative from the mentioned country. He continued, "To prevent some from misunderstanding this technology, please look at the big screen." With that, he gestured for everyone to look at the screen. The screen displayed a flurry of text and images, detailing room temperature superconductivity technology and its related applications. In the energy sector, it could facilitate power transmission, save electricity, and allow for energy storage, with implications for nuclear fusion devices, meaning a significant increase in energy efficiency and a potential fundamental solution to energy issues. In transportation, maglev trains. Superconducting maglev trains and aircraft would experience revolutionary breakthroughs due to room temperature superconductivity, with speeds and performance far exceeding current levels. In communications, it would enable quantum communication, achieving a new height in speed and security of information transmission. As the representative from the mentioned country introduced these advancements, the audience erupted in exclamations, their faces filled with shock and envy. Is room temperature superconductivity really that impressive? This is like a technology from the future, they thought. No wonder the mentioned country has developed it. Gu Chuanwen furrowed his brow, looking at his team. They exchanged glances, remaining silent, but filled with skepticism regarding the representative's claims. The Bear Country representative, however, was taken aback, his eyes wide with astonishment. Clearly familiar with the challenges of achieving room temperature superconductivity, he couldn't hold back, exclaiming, "Isn't room temperature superconductivity very difficult to achieve? How could the mentioned country have succeeded? How is this even possible? Mr. Gu, don't you feel surprised? Why don't you say something?" The representative from a certain country showed a hint of confusion and unease in his eyes. Chapter 231. They love eating our bananas. Isn't room temperature superconductivity difficult to achieve? How did they manage to succeed? Representatives from certain allied nations were so excited they could hardly contain themselves. Room temperature superconductivity. That is truly remarkable. The representative from one of those allied nations was blushing, with a spark of enthusiasm in his eyes. If they achieve a breakthrough, we can benefit from it too. Let others be jealous. Haha, as far as I know, that nation is still at the initial stage of research on room temperature superconductivity. And now they're going to be left behind. Another representative chimed in mockingly. The representative from the banana nation was nodding vigorously, echoing, "I knew that following them was the best choice. They're going to lead us to new glory again." With their encouragement, cheers and applause erupted from the audience, nearly shaking the roof off the venue. The representative from the allied nation was so excited he stood up, clapping vigorously while shouting, "Excuse me, esteemed representative. When did you achieve this great breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity?" His question drew everyone's attention like a spotlight, and others chimed in. "Yes, when did the breakthrough happen? What great news. Which team from your country developed it? Was it Dr. X's team? I've heard they were the most likely to achieve room temperature superconductivity. Please share more information about it. The more, the better." Upon hearing this, the representative seemed momentarily taken aback, a fleeting look of confusion crossing his face. But he quickly regained composure, smiling as he explained, "What are you talking about? We Haven Tea achieved room temperature superconductivity." This statement hit the audience like a bombshell, leaving everyone stunned. What does that mean? Didn't you just say you mastered the technology? How can you say you Haven Tea now? Are you messing with us? Someone angrily questioned, and the entire venue was thrown into chaos. The representative seemed to realize that his words had caused misunderstanding. He quickly waved his hand, smiling, "You misunderstood. What I meant was that we achieved breakthroughs in the context of the human community. When I say we, I mean all of humanity, not just our country." However, as the crowd listened to his explanation, they became even more bewildered, exchanging glances filled with confusion. The representative from the first country didn't have the patience for this, and said loudly, "Stop beating around the bush. Just tell us who has actually achieved room temperature superconductivity." The entire venue fell silent in an instant, everyone holding their breath, waiting for the representative's answer. The representative took a deep breath and spoke loudly and clearly. "The Dragon Nation." The sound was so loud that it exceeded normal decibel levels, echoing in the quiet conference room like thunder. This statement left everyone present in shock. What? The Dragon Nation? Did I hear that right? The representative actually said the Dragon Nation. They have achieved breakthroughs in room temperature superconductivity? Oh my gosh, this can't be true. For a moment, the entire venue felt as if it had been frozen in place, and everyone was stunned. Those who had just been cheering moments ago now looked as if they had been slapped hard across the face, feeling a sting. Just a moment ago, they had been boasting about how the Dragon Nation would be envious, but reality had slapped them back, and an awkward atmosphere spread around them. The representative from the neighboring country looked at Gu Chuanwen in shock, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Wow, Mr. Gu, has your country really achieved room temperature superconductivity technology?" All eyes again focused on Gu Chuanwen, who narrowed his eyes slightly, his gaze sharp as he stared at the representative, not answering the question but instead countering with another. "I'm curious, how did your country learn that we have mastered room temperature superconductivity technology? Even if it were true, shouldn't that be a secret of our nation?" Upon hearing Gu Chuanwen's words, everyone was once again confused. What does that mean? What does even if it were true imply? So is it true or not? Someone murmured quietly, and the atmosphere in the venue became even more bizarre. Of course it's true. The representative's voice rang out again, as he suddenly pulled a cable from a box he had brought with him. The cable looked unremarkable, but under the venue's lighting, It seemed to have a mysterious glow. Instantly, it captured the attention of everyone present. The representative held up the cable like a torch, symbolizing human civilization, and said, "This is the cable derived from room temperature superconductivity technology. Our renowned materials science expert, Dr. Hirul, after thorough research, has confirmed that this is room temperature superconductivity." As he spoke, he looked at Gu Chuanwen, a slight smirk of satisfaction appearing on his face. "As for how we came to know this news, do you want to hear the truth or a lie?" The representative deliberately paused, then continued. "The lie would be that someone from your country brought the cable out, and we intercepted it and discovered this secret. The truth is, we can't disclose how we found out." The representative felt quite pleased to unveil the Dragon Nation's secret to the public, and the pride in his eyes was nearly overflowing. However, the opposite was true for the representatives from other countries, especially the allies of the representative, who were now green with envy. So, does this mean the Dragon Nation really has achieved breakthroughs in room temperature superconductivity? They even brought out physical materials. How could it be false? Have you heard? The scientist who confirmed that it is a room temperature superconducting material is Dr. Hillel, a highly renowned expert. He has even won the Nobel Prize. This means that a significant technological breakthrough has been made by a certain country? How will other nations cope with this? A representative from a certain country discreetly shifted to the side, his eyes darting around. Then he whispered to the person next to him, "You also support this country, right? They are so impressive. Being associated with them surely has a bright future." "That's right. They are indeed remarkable, and we are preparing to establish diplomatic relations with them. They love our bananas the most." Chapter 232. If it were that guy, it might not be impossible. Meanwhile, the news of a potential breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity from that country exploded like a bomb, instantly causing a stir worldwide. The news spread rapidly, as if it had grown wings, creating waves of excitement wherever it went. Across the globe, from seasoned experts in related fields to ordinary people with a slight interest in technological developments, everyone seemed frantic to verify the authenticity of this news. They sought out various channels to inquire with experts from that country, eager to receive conclusive answers from these professionals. However, faced with a flood of inquiries, most experts from that country appeared bewildered, responding almost in unison, "I don't know, don't ask me." Among the many experts questioned, Professor Su Cheng, a materials scientist from that country, was undoubtedly the most besieged by foreign experts. After all, he is a foundational figure in the field of materials science in his country, a towering presence with significant international reputation. When Professor Su initially heard the inquiries, his first reaction was one of sheer shock. His eyes widened, and his mouth fell open as if he could fit an egg inside, exclaiming, "What? What did you say? Our country has developed room temperature superconductivity? How could I not know about such a major event? I truly have no idea." Professor Su was puzzled. He knew that given the current state of research in his country, although there had been continuous efforts to catch up with international standards in the field of materials science, achieving a breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity was no simple task. The various conditions involved, research equipment, theoretical foundations, talent reserves, and so on, seemed to him to be far from sufficient to realize such a technological breakthrough in the short term. However, after several reminders from everyone, Professor Su hastily began to pay attention to the live news coverage of the joint conference. When he saw that the source of the news was actually a certain country's representatives at the meeting, he instantly understood. "Got it." Professor Su snorted coldly to himself, already aware. This must be yet another scheme from those guys. Humph, they love to play these tricks, attempting to confuse the narrative with ill intentions. Professor Su Cheng is well acquainted with the research landscape in the domestic materials science field, having spent many years navigating this domain. He is undoubtedly an authority in this area. He is confident that the teams capable of making breakthroughs in room temperature superconductivity technology are exceptionally rare and can be counted on one hand. Moreover, many core members of these teams are his former students. He often finds himself invested in their research and development efforts. In fact, there are many occasions when they encounter challenges that require his personal intervention to help resolve. It's no exaggeration to say he is intimately familiar with the progress of these students' work, as clear as he knows the lines on his own palm. In his view, these teams face numerous obstacles on the path to achieving room temperature superconductivity, akin to the challenges faced by a legendary figure and his disciples on their quest for enlightenment, needing to overcome one seemingly insurmountable hurdle after another to make progress. Each challenge is like a formidable barrier blocking their way, making their journey arduous. It's important to recognize that breakthroughs in this technology cannot be achieved overnight. It's no easy feat. Professor Su couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. Of course, apart from the teams and students he knows so well, one person suddenly came to Professor Su's mind. Su Chun. Just thinking of Su Chun brought a complex expression to his face, a mix of admiration for the young man and nostalgia for their past collaborations. Back when they were researching individual combat exoskeletons together, it was truly an unforgettable experience. Although he had helped Su Chun a lot, he often found himself in a supporting role. Yes, the esteemed figure in materials science was assisting Su Chun. Through their interactions, they developed a significant mentor-student bond. However, if we were to be precise, Su Chun was the mentor and Professor Su was the student. On many occasions, Professor Su learned cutting-edge theories and unique knowledge about materials science from Su Chun, which greatly benefited him and opened up a new realm of understanding in the field. Just recently, they had an exchange, but at that time, Su Chun was deeply involved in a highly confidential project, making it difficult for them to meet and have a proper discussion. At this moment, as Professor Su thought of Su Chun, his heart began to race uncontrollably. If it were Su Chun, if it were that young man, perhaps breakthroughs in room temperature superconductivity were indeed possible. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became, vividly recalling Su Chin's intelligence and quick thinking. His conviction in this possibility grew stronger. He really wanted to call Su Chun immediately to find out what was going on. However, as soon as that thought crossed his mind, he hesitated. He was well aware that this matter involved state secrets. If he rashly called to inquire, it might bring unnecessary trouble to Su Chun, which would not be good. He didn't want to put Su Chun in a difficult position due to his momentary impulse. In the end, Professor Su Chun gritted his teeth, forcibly suppressing the excitement within him that felt like a runaway wild horse, deciding to wait for more concrete news before acting. Just then, the phone next to him suddenly rang without warning, the sound starkly interrupting the quietness of the room and startling Professor Su Chun. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down, and then slowly picked up the phone. To his surprise, the voice on the other end was Su Chun. Xiao Su, why are you calling me at this time? Professor Su Cheng's voice revealed a hint of surprise and barely concealed excitement. Despite his efforts to restrain it, a slight tremor could still be heard. Professor Su, are you busy? Su Chen asked with concern. If you are, I can call back later. Professor Su Cheng inwardly chuckled. He knew that Su Chen definitely couldn't understand the complex feelings he was experiencing at that moment. He realized that since Su Chen was calling him, it must be important. So he quickly replied, not busy. What is on your mind? Su Chen nodded and said, that's good. Actually, there is something I've been wanting to tell you for a while, but I forgot because I was too busy. Thanks to someone reminding me, I finally remembered. Hearing this, Professor Su Cheng's curiosity was piqued, and he couldn't wait to ask, so, what is it? Su Chen continued. You know we made a breakthrough in room temperature superconductivity technology, right? So, before Su Chen could finish, he was interrupted by the astonished exclamation of the professor. What? Xiao Su, what did you say? Are you saying we really achieved room temperature superconductivity? Professor Su Cheng's voice instantly rose several octaves. His shocked expression was as if he had just heard the most unbelievable news in the world. In that quiet office, the excitement that Professor Su Cheng had previously suppressed surged like molten lava trapped beneath a volcano. At that moment, when Su Chen mentioned room temperature superconductivity over the phone, the long-suppressed excitement erupted like a volcano. Professor Su Cheng never expected that this young man, Su Chen, would so easily unlock the intense thirst for knowledge that he had struggled to suppress earlier. On the other end of the line, Su Chen heard Professor Su Cheng's voice, which was somewhat distorted with excitement, and quickly said with a smile, don't get too excited, Professor Su. You're getting on in years. You must be careful not to trigger your hypertension. Let us take it easy. His words were laced with a hint of teasing, trying to help Professor Su calm down. However, at that moment, Professor Su could hardly pay attention to Su Chen's lightheartedness. His excitement was mixed with worry. He furrowed his brows and said seriously, Xiao Su. Actually, I've wanted to ask you this for a long time, but I've been worried it might involve confidentiality issues. You know, this room temperature superconducting technology is no trivial matter. It could create a significant stir in the tech world and even the entire globe. And such a big deal. How can it be casually discussed over the phone? What if someone is listening in? If you have something to discuss, just let me come over and talk in person. I'm still quite agile on my feet. Professor Su's voice was filled with urgency and concern as he understood the importance of confidentiality regarding such crucial technological achievements. Su Chun was somewhat surprised by Professor Su's words. He didn't expect that such a leading figure in materials science in their country would have such a strong awareness of confidentiality in this situation. He couldn't help but smile slightly and said casually, confidentiality? Professor Su, it's just room temperature superconducting technology. It's no longer a secret. There's nothing to keep confidential. Besides, those folks have already announced it to the world at the joint conference. Even if we wanted to keep it confidential, it's too late. As he spoke, images of various arrangements for the Spring Festival Gala flashed through his mind. Their country had decided to showcase its top technological achievements on this special stage. So it seemed there was no need to keep the room temperature superconducting technology a secret anymore. Then, Su Chen got down to business. His voice came through the phone clearly and steadily to Professor Su's ears. Professor Su. The main reason I'm calling today is to ask you and your team to gather all the materials science teams across the nation to work on the application development of room temperature superconducting technology. Su Chen's tone was filled with anticipation and hope for future technological applications. Just think about it. Such a great material has enormous application potential. It cannot be limited to the energy sector. It can have much broader applications, such as realizing large-scale popularization of ultra-high-speed maglev trains in transportation, and aiding the development of quantum communication in the communication sector. Unfortunately, I don't have time to engage in this application research myself right now. I have more important matters to attend to, so I have to rely on you and the experts for this. Upon hearing Su Chen's words, Professor Su's eyes widened slightly, revealing a hint of surprise on his face. It dawned on him that this meant their country had truly made a breakthrough in room temperature superconducting technology. The realization struck him like lightning, instantly dispelling the lingering doubts he had. However, he couldn't afford to linger in shock. as he immediately felt a heavy responsibility settle upon his shoulders. Professor Su Cheng felt as though the long-dormant passion within him had been reignited at that moment, bubbling up uncontrollably. He understood that the application development of room-temperature superconducting technology was no small matter. If successfully advanced, it could significantly change the way humanity lives. This was undoubtedly a great research project. Now, this crucial project had been entrusted to them by Su Chen, which made Professor Su feel the weight of his responsibility and filled him with gratitude for Su Chen's trust. This time, Su Chen was merely giving him a heads up. But what surprised Professor Su was that soon after, the official project appointment letter was delivered to him by a designated person. Holding the appointment letter, Professor Su immediately understood that it must have been arranged after discussions between Su Chen and the higher-ups. Thus, on that very day, he sprang into action. First, he sat at his desk and carefully reviewed the list of teams and materials science that he was familiar with, then began making phone calls one after another. Hello, Lao Li, it's Su Cheng. I have some fantastic news. Our country has made a breakthrough in room-temperature superconducting technology, and we need your team to get involved in the application development. Professor Zhang, I have an important project concerning the application of room-temperature superconducting technology. We need to rally our forces and make this happen, so please arrange for your team as soon as possible. Professor Su's voice on the phone conveyed an undeniable excitement and urgency, with each call transmitting the weighty mission at hand. In that moment, this seasoned scholar seemed to have regained the youthful vigor he once had. He was not crushed by the heavy research task. On the contrary, just the thought of participating in such a significant task that could benefit humanity and the heavy responsibility entrusted to him filled him with boundless energy. He threw himself into the preparations with great enthusiasm. At the sight of the joint meeting, the atmosphere was notably strange compared to the beginning. The spacious conference hall appeared to be divided into two distinctly different factions, each exhibiting contrasting emotional climates. One group, upon learning about the breakthrough in room-temperature superconducting technology, wore expressions of excitement and joy, unable to contain their cheers for this latest scientific achievement. To them, it represented another significant milestone in human technological history, indicating that future lives would undergo tremendous changes because of this technology, and they would benefit from it. On the other hand, the second group wore frowns and sighed heavily. This group consisted of those aligned with a certain country, except for the nation known for its bananas. Hey, who said I'm a loyal follower of that country? I'm just a devoted servant of Long Go, okay? Long Go, please love me once more. Chapter 234. The Weasel pays a New Year's visit to the chicken. The representatives from various countries, who are loyal to that country, are now in deep distress. For them, the breakthrough in room-temperature superconductivity technology by Long Country is certainly not a cause for celebration, but rather a huge headache. They are well aware that any future plans related to room-temperature superconductivity, whether to use this technology to advance their own technological development or to participate in international technology cooperation projects, will inevitably be constrained by Long Country. It feels as if an invisible leash is tightly holding their necks, with the other end firmly in the hands of Long Country. They can only watch helplessly as Long Country dominates this field, feeling utterly powerless and frustrated. The only thing that offers them some relief is that this news was leaked in advance, rather than waiting until Long Country has fully leveraged this technology to transform its infrastructure and other aspects, leaving them in the dark. They also understand that the intention behind the leak is to undermine Long Country, trying to create some unfavorable international opinion to put Long Country in a passive position regarding this technological achievement. While they secretly complain that this tactic may not achieve the desired effect, they also turn their attention to Gu Chuanwen, the representative from Long Country, who is sitting not far away. Gu Chuanwen sits calmly in his seat, showing no signs of joy or anger on his face, quietly observing everything around him as if the commotion has nothing to do with him. This surprises the representatives from that country, making them wonder, how can he be so composed when such crucial secrets have been leaked? Could the news from that country be false? In an instant, they are filled with confusion and doubt. Just then, the representative from that country slightly clears his throat, once again capturing everyone's attention. With a deliberately mysterious expression, he speaks loudly. Next, we will announce another very important matter. The recent bombshell regarding Long Country's breakthrough in room-temperature superconductivity technology has already stirred a huge wave in the conference hall. Before the crowd has fully recovered from this shock, they see the representative clearing his throat again, ready to announce yet another significant matter. This frightens the representatives from the countries even more. They can't help but wonder, is there more news about Long Country's technological research? No, please, no. These representatives are now so tense that they feel their hearts might leap out of their throats. Their faces pale, filled with fear and anxiety. They were truly intimidated by the series of technological breakthroughs from a certain country, fearing that there might be even more astonishing revelations about their technology. At that moment, Gu Chuanwen, sitting in his position, also felt a slight shift in his gaze. He could not help but feel puzzled, secretly contemplating. Surely they can't have more intelligence on our technological advancements, right? This certain country is known for only acting when there is something to gain. What are they up to this time? His eyes were fixed on the representative from that country on stage, trying to glean some clues from their expressions and behavior. However, what the representative said next brought an unexpected turn to the situation. The representative stood on stage with a seemingly friendly smile and slowly began to speak. We believe that great efforts have been made by your country in achieving room temperature superconductivity. This is evident to all of us. Now, your nation is facing the impacts of an energy crisis, and we understand the difficulties involved. Everyone knows that achieving large-scale application of room temperature superconductivity technology is no simple task. It requires substantial investment, manpower, and various resources. Given the current situation, it would be quite challenging for your country to accomplish this daunting task independently. At this point, the representative paused slightly, scanning the audience of representatives from various nations as if observing their reactions, then continued, "For this reason, we have decided to provide funding and research support to your country." They quickly added, "Of course, we absolutely do not intend to have your country share the results of this endeavor. We are not that shameless. We only hope to promote your development and utilization of room temperature superconductivity technology. After all, if this technology can be better developed and applied, it would be a great benefit for all of humanity. Furthermore, I would like to formally state that all the funding and research support we offer will be provided free of charge. Our Secretary of State will oversee this matter. We understand that the Spring Festival is a very festive day for your country, and our Secretary of State will come a day earlier to discuss the details of the cooperation with you. We believe this collaboration will undoubtedly lead to a leap forward for all of humanity." As soon as the representative finished speaking, thunderous applause erupted from the audience. The allies from that country breathed a sigh of relief. Their previously tense expressions now softened considerably. Although they were unsure why this country was suddenly willing to help, at least it wasn't new technology. Otherwise, they would have been truly frightened. Meanwhile, the representatives from another nation, upon hearing the remarks from the representative, were initially taken aback and then looked at Gu Chuanwen with surprise, whispering, "Is this some kind of miracle? They are actually offering you funding and technology without asking for anything in return? Is this the same country that only sees profit? You should be cautious. I sense there is something more to this. They must have ulterior motives, and there could be some hidden schemes behind it." The representative from the Bear country frowned, his eyes revealing a hint of vigilance. He understood the actions of certain entities all too well, and this situation seemed off in every way. Gu Chuanwen, as a representative of the Dragon country who had dealt with those entities multiple times, naturally did not believe that they would act out of goodwill. He was clear about their intentions. According to their usual style, if they encountered such a situation, they would either find a way to eliminate the scientific team from the Dragon country that achieved breakthroughs in room temperature superconductivity, cutting off the foundation for the Dragon country's continued development, or they would stop at nothing to poach those scientists for themselves, making the Dragon country's technological achievements serve their own interests. This was clearly a case of a weasel wishing a chicken a happy new year, with ulterior motives. As the meeting progressed, various agendas were gradually completed, and it finally came to an end. Representatives from different countries left the venue one after another, each with their own complex emotions. The representative from the Bear country approached Gu Chuanwen, patted him on the shoulder, and said, "When I return, I will discuss with our higher-ups to see if we can provide some technical assistance. Developing room temperature superconductivity could indeed elevate humanity to a different height, which would benefit everyone. However, as for funding, forget it. You know our domestic situation, it's quite difficult." The Bear representative shook his head helplessly, his face filled with a bitter smile. Gu Chuanwen smiled calmly and nodded. He also knew that the Bear country's current economic situation was far from optimistic. Not just economically. The Bear country now resembled a dilapidated straw hut, teetering on the brink of collapse. A single push could send a group of burly men rushing out to attack you. Faced with his own national circumstances, the Bear representative felt quite helpless. Sigh, with wars and energy crises, life is truly hard these days. If it weren't for your country willing to assist us, we would have long been unable to hold on. After saying this, he shook his head heavily, filled with emotion, and turned to leave the venue. Gu Chuanwen also shook his head, silently sighing at the complexities and changes of the international situation. Just as he was preparing to leave with his team, suddenly, a representative from the Banana country hurried over. With a flattering smile, he said to Gu Chuanwen, "Mr. Gu, we would like to conduct a state visit to your country as well. Is it possible to arrange it during the Spring Festival?" Upon hearing this, Gu Chuanwen's brow furrowed immediately. Without any politeness, he cursed, "Get lost," and quickly left with his team without looking back. The representative from the Banana country was momentarily stunned, standing there in disbelief, his face filled with confusion. He simply could not understand why the Dragon country's representative would be so furious. What was wrong? Were they not welcome? Had they been completely blacklisted by the Dragon country? At that moment, the representative from the Banana country felt no anger. Instead, he was filled with fear. He knew that offending the Dragon country was no trivial matter, and life on the international stage would likely become even more difficult from then on. But he felt quite wronged. He just wanted to join in the fun and build some connections. Why did it provoke such anger from the representatives of the country? No. Please don't, dear leader. In the highest level conference room of the country, a group of high-ranking officials had gathered. If outsiders were to catch a glimpse of this scene, they would surely be astonished. It wasn't just because of the supreme status of these individuals. After all, those who could participate in such a high-level meeting already held positions far beyond the reach of ordinary people. What was truly surprising was that amidst this assembly of dignified and mature leaders, there sat a young man rather conspicuously. In a crowd full of people who exuded a sense of calm and wisdom from years of experience, this young man stood out as particularly unique. This person was none other than Su Chun. He hadn't even fully woken up that day, still lost in the sweetness of his dreams. He was abruptly pulled back to reality by a series of urgent knocks on the door. Following that, in a flurry of activity, he was yanked from his warm bed. After getting ready in a rush, he was hastily invited to attend this crucial meeting. As for why he was invited, Su Chun himself was quite puzzled. In fact, this decision was made after careful discussion by the top 2 leaders of the country, allowing him to attend the meeting. Officially, it was said that he was there to familiarize himself with the faces of the leaders, making future tasks easier, but in reality, the deeper meaning behind this decision was likely clear only to a few high-ranking officials. At this moment, Su Chun had shaken off any remnants of sleepiness due to the sudden turn of events. He was quite alert now, his eyes wide open, curiously observing everyone in the conference room. Besides the top 2 leaders, the most elite group of individuals who controlled the lifeblood of the nation and guided its development were also present. They were already well aware of the recent series of international events closely related to the country. Gu Chuanwen, an important figure representing the country on the international stage and handling various diplomatic affairs, was naturally part of this meeting as well. The meeting was chaired by Elder Qin, a respected figure who had made remarkable contributions throughout the country's development. Every decision he made and every word he spoke carried significant weight. Elder Qin slowly surveyed the crowd, his gaze calm yet profound. Once everyone's attention was focused on him, he spoke steadily. You all know the situation. They are planning to visit our country during the Spring Festival under the pretense of benefiting all humanity. This matter, no matter how you look at it, feels unsettling and makes it hard not to suspect their true intentions. In front of this group of leaders, Su Chun showed no signs of intimidation. His inherent curiosity resurfaced, and he furrowed his brow, asking, Elder Qin, what do you think their true purpose is? The situation has been quite unusual lately, leading to suspicions about their true intentions. Elder Qin smiled gently in response to Su Chun's question, exuding a calmness and wisdom that comes from experience. He patiently explained, Young Su, there are things you may not be aware of. We had already decided to close our borders around the Spring Festival for various important reasons related to our domestic arrangements and plans. Coincidentally, at this time, they expressed a desire to cooperate, and specifically set the timeline within our original plans. It's hard not to suspect that this was intentional on their part. Moreover, their approach is rather cunning. We can't easily refuse it. If we do, we could be labeled as selfish, especially since their offer comes without conditions, which could put us in a difficult position in the international arena. Upon hearing Elder Qin's detailed explanation, Su Chun suddenly understood. He had been puzzled about their sudden benevolence, but now it made sense. The others had no objections to Elder Qin sharing this confidential information with Su Chun. After all, he was no ordinary young person. He played a crucial role in many significant projects and had a very high level of confidentiality clearance. Even privy to matters that some senior officials present might not be allowed to know. At this moment, a senior leader furrowed his brow, looking worried, and asked, what should we do? Should we really agree to their cooperation invitation? We can't make a hasty decision. What if we fall into their trap? Elder Qin remained calm and composed. He smiled lightly and said, they're offering us funds and technology. Why would we refuse? If they want to visit, let them visit. But we must have our own conditions. Su Chin's eyes lit up at the mention of conditions, and he curiously pressed, what conditions? Elder Qin, please tell me. Elder Qin looked at Su Chin's eager expression and happily laid out the conditions. Everyone was initially taken aback, but then couldn't help but laugh. Elder Qin truly had a way with conditions. Meanwhile, a week had passed since the joint meeting, but the situation on their side remained unchanged, unresponsive to various external movements. This left the other side quite anxious, akin to ants on a hot pan, restless and turning in circles. Someone couldn't help but complain. Are they trying to brush this off? If they do, we need to bring it up at every meeting and ensure they face public scrutiny. The president, feeling frustrated, retorted. Public scrutiny? Why do you keep wanting to use the same tactics they used against us before? What is going on? Is it a change in strategy? Do you think the nation in question is worried about this? Only the weak care about public opinion and what others think. The strong simply make opposing voices disappear. The leader of the nation was furious, sitting behind a large desk with a face so grim it seemed water could drip from it. At this moment, the Secretary of State could no longer sit still. He paced back and forth in the office, frowning deeply. After a moment of contemplation, he decided to send someone to the embassy of the nation in question to inquire about the situation. We can't just sit and wait for them to come to us. This time, we need to stick to them like a stubborn plaster and make sure they give us an explanation. The Secretary of State gritted his teeth and said fiercely. Inside the embassy of the nation, there was a quiet yet busy atmosphere. The representative of the nation and ambassador, Gu Chuanwen, sat at a large desk, fully focused on handling various documents. He occasionally furrowed his brows in thought and jotted down notes, exuding a sense of calm and competence that showcased the demeanor of a major country's envoy. At that moment, a staff member gently knocked on the office door and softly announced, Ambassador, the Secretary of State would like to see you. Upon hearing this, Gu Chuanwen's lips curled into a slight, barely noticeable smile. He nodded slightly, signaling for the staff to bring the Secretary of State to his office. Before long, the Secretary of State entered Gu Chuanwen's office, guided by the staff. Their eyes met. each carrying a sense of scrutiny and calculation. They then exchanged a polite handshake, a seemingly ordinary gesture that felt like a silent contest of strength. After the handshake, Gu Chuanwen smiled and inquired about the Secretary of State's purpose. His tone calm yet polite, subtly revealing an undeniable presence. The Secretary of State showed no signs of hesitation and directly stated the purpose of his visit. "I am here regarding our proposal from the previous joint conference," he said, puffing out his chest with confidence. "We place great importance on your nation's room temperature superconductivity technology. And we understand that if this technology can be fully developed and applied, it would be a groundbreaking achievement for all humanity. Therefore, we are willing to provide funding and technical support. I believe this is truly a fantastic proposal for all humanity." At this point, the secretary paused, slightly furrowing his brows. And after a 2-second contemplation, continued, "However, we have yet to receive even a hint of a response. We are eager to know your stance. Are you willing to accept our assistance for the future of all humanity?" His words seemed to carry a sense of urgency and dissatisfaction, as if the lack of an immediate response from the nation was a dereliction of responsibility towards the future of all humanity. Gu Chuanwen couldn't help but smirk inwardly, thinking to himself, using the future of all humanity as leverage against us. Are they here to cooperate or to apply pressure? However, he maintained a calm smile on his face and said slowly, "So, Mr. Secretary, you are here to ask for our stance, right? Of course, no problem. In fact, we have seriously considered cooperating with your side." Gu Chuanwen paused slightly, casting a meaningful glance at the secretary, and continued, "But you know both our countries are suffering from an energy crisis caused by some foolish nation. The financial situation in your country must not be good either. How can we let you invest your money and efforts to help us?" Upon hearing this, the secretary couldn't help but twitch his lips. He immediately felt as if he had just been scolded by Gu Chuanwen, but he couldn't get angry or retaliate. If he really lost his temper, it would confirm that they were indeed the foolish ones causing the energy crisis. Helpless, he decided to pretend he didn't hear the underlying jab in Gu Chuanwen's words and forced a smile as he replied, "No, no, no. Our nation is under divine protection and foresaw this potential energy crisis in advance, so we have stockpiled quite a bit of energy. Compared to us, your situation must be even more difficult." As he spoke, the secretary felt secretly pleased, thinking that his words cleverly sidestepped Gu Chuanwen's sarcasm while highlighting their advantages. Gu Chuanwen couldn't help but snort in his heart. Still pretending, he merely raised an eyebrow slightly. The secretary didn't notice this subtle change in Gu Chuanwen's expression and continued to speak passionately. "So, with our financial and technical assistance, we can surely achieve the application of room temperature superconducting technology at the fastest speed. When that happens, it will not only be the glory of your nation, but also a blessing for all humanity." The secretary spoke with enthusiasm, as if he could already see the beautiful scene of room temperature superconducting technology rapidly flourishing with their help. Gu Chuanwen listened and chuckled lightly, feigning surprise as he elongated his tone. "Oh, is that true?" Then, as if recalling something unfortunate, he sighed softly and said, "Well, to be honest with you, you might not know, but due to the energy crisis, our country is indeed in a precarious situation right now. We no longer have extra funds for the research and development of room temperature superconducting technology. If your side wants to help, the financial pressure might be considerable. So I advise you to wait a bit. After this energy crisis passes, we can discuss this cooperation again. How about that?" The secretary was taken aback by Gu Chuanwen's words. He secretly lamented that in major diplomatic affairs, there are indeed traps everywhere. The ambassador from that nation actually claimed they were in a precarious situation. Could that be true? Is this real or not? Although they had previously speculated that the nation might be struggling, they didn't expect them to admit it so openly. The Secretary of State, who has suffered many losses from interactions with a certain country, is cautious about believing these words. But if this were false, it would imply that the situation in that country is actually quite good now. They are doing well. Chapter 237. Thank you for listening. No. The Secretary of State quickly reconsidered. How could that be possible? After all, the energy crisis is a pressing issue, and can that country remain unaffected? Just a few casual words from Gu Chuanwen left the Secretary of State confused. Yet, that was not the most critical part. What followed was even more alarming. That country actually intends to wait until the crisis passes before cooperating. How can that be allowed? They originally planned to time their diplomatic visit around the Spring Festival, taking advantage of the country's closure of entry and exit channels. In other words, the so-called aid was just a facade. The real focus was on the subsequent visit plan. The Secretary of State couldn't help but ponder. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something was amiss. He had a strong feeling that that country seemed to have seen through their plan. If they were to delay cooperation as proposed by that country, they could accept the aid offered without impacting the closure of channels around the Spring Festival. Moreover, according to that country, it was not a refusal of aid but rather a lack of funds for research, making it impossible to pressure them through public opinion. After all, it is a recognized fact that all nations are suffering from the energy crisis. And it is almost universally acknowledged that the country in question is experiencing the most severe impact due to its high energy demands. At this moment, the Secretary of State felt as if he was lifting a rock only to drop it on his own foot. However, he was not the type to give up easily, as this plan was too crucial for him. So, he took a deep breath to calm himself, then pretended to be generous and said, Is it just about the funds? That's not an issue. We are quite capable in that regard, as long as we can promote the development of room temperature superconducting technology for the benefit of all humanity. We are willing to invest whatever it takes. Besides, we have been less affected by this impact. Whatever amount is needed, we can provide it. We can discuss the specifics when I visit your country. The Secretary of State spoke confidently. Gu Chuanwen was momentarily taken aback. He never expected the Secretary of State to take such an approach. However, he quickly regained his composure, the corners of his mouth curling up into a meaningful smile. He excitedly replied, I can already feel your commitment to the well-being of humanity, Mr. Secretary. You truly have impressed us. The Secretary of State felt a bit elated by this compliment and couldn't help but smile, secretly pleased that his tactic was effective. But in the next moment, his smile froze on his face, as if he had been hit by a spell. Gu Chuanwen calmly took out a document from his briefcase. The action seemed casual, but sent a wave of ominous premonition through the Secretary of State. If it's about the amount of financial aid, there's no need for a state visit. That can also work. Saying this, Gu Chuanwen handed the document in his hand to the Secretary of State. The other party, filled with confusion, took it, and upon seeing it, his eyes widened. It turned out to be details of project funding related to room temperature superconducting technology. Upon a closer look at the amount needed at the end of the document, he was stunned. It was about 300 billion. The Secretary of State was completely taken aback, feeling as if someone had hit him on the head, his mind buzzing. Gu Chuanwen, smiling beside him, said, this funding project document was drafted by the team of Professor Su Chong, a leading figure in materials science in our country. Absolutely professional. Mr. Secretary, as mentioned earlier, your country is less affected by the energy crisis, and I can sense your strong determination to contribute to human civilization. So I guess 300 billion shouldn't be much for you, right? Just transfer it directly to our account when the time comes. The Secretary of State was utterly bewildered, his hands slightly trembling as he held the document. He had a strong feeling that he had fallen into some carefully designed trap, and at that moment, he found himself in a very awkward position, caught between a rock and a hard place. After pondering for a long time, he suddenly twitched at the corner of his mouth and said with difficulty, the funding needed for these projects is quite substantial. Gu Chuanwen helplessly replied, that's why I said we currently lack the capability. You know, we are suffering from an energy crisis and truly have the will, but not the strength. However, compared to the advancement of human civilization, this amount should not be a big deal for you. After all, your country's annual GDP is in the tens of trillions. At this moment, the Secretary of State was filled with regret, increasingly believing that he had fallen into a trap. Moreover, according to Gu Chuanwen's words, not only did he have to come up with a large sum of money, but he also couldn't carry out the originally planned state visit. If he agreed to this, it would indeed be a huge loss. The Secretary of State just wanted to find an excuse to retreat quickly, secretly cursing. These guys are too scheming. In front of them, I feel like a naive elementary school student being toyed with. No, this isn't going to work. I need to think of another way. But a clever hunter knows that to get the prey to bite, they have to taste a bit of sweetness. It's not just about intimidation. Otherwise, the prey could easily be scared away. Just as the Secretary of State was racking his brain on how to escape, Gu Chuanwen revealed a barely noticeable smile. Suddenly, he spoke again. If your country is truly sincere, as a gesture of goodwill, we would like to invite your side to our country to watch our Spring Festival Gala live. The Secretary of State inwardly cursed. Forget it. Who cares about your Spring Festival Gala? He hadn't forgotten the main purpose of his visit and couldn't be misled by this bizarre invitation. But soon, it seemed like he suddenly realized something. A thought flashed through his mind. Spring Festival Gala? Isn't that a program that only happens during the Spring Festival? In other words, the Secretary of State's eyes lit up, and he quickly asked, did you just say I could go to your country to watch the program? Gu Chuanwen nodded and smiled, saying, of course. It's a live broadcast, and I believe you will love the lively atmosphere. Upon hearing this, the Secretary of State trembled with excitement. He thought to himself, wow, they actually took the initiative to invite me. His original goal was to visit the Dragon Country to gather information, and whether it was under the guise of a state visit or to watch a program didn't matter to him. He just wanted to go. Great. Thank you. We'll cover the expenses. The Secretary of State said without hesitation, as if the 300 billion was just a small sum. He was filled with excitement about the chance to enter the Dragon Country to gather intelligence. Gu Chuanwen secretly smiled. How polite. It should be us thanking you. Chapter 238. Journey to the Dragon Country. After returning to the palace, the president had been anxiously waiting in the conference room for news. As soon as he saw the Secretary of State come in, he eagerly asked, did the Dragon Country respond? The Secretary of State nodded slightly and said, they did respond. However, they declined our state visit for some reasons. Upon hearing this, everyone was furious, with some angrily banging the table and shouting, the Dragon Country is going too far. We can't let this go. I want to condemn them publicly, harshly. Let the whole world see how selfish they are. Others echoed in agreement. And the conference room was filled with anger. The Secretary of State quickly tried to calm them down. Don't be too agitated. Things are not as bad as you think. Although they declined our state visit, they agreed to let me participate in their Spring Festival Gala. This way, we can still gather some information. After hearing this, everyone calmed down a bit. After a moment of thought, someone said, no matter what, as long as the Dragon Country agrees to let us go, that's enough. Looking at it this way, our plan is still quite useful. On the surface, it's for cooperation, but in reality, we mainly want to enter their country. Whether it's a visit or attending the so-called Spring Festival Gala, doesn't matter. This tactic is like a show of strength while secretly achieving our goal. It seems the Dragon Country has fallen for it this time. Someone laughed triumphantly, and others joined in, their laughter filled with self-satisfaction over their successful scheme. Once they finished laughing, the Secretary of State said again, "However, even though we can attend their Spring Festival Gala, there are conditions." The president casually waved his hand and said nonchalantly, "What conditions?" "It doesn't matter as long as we achieve our goal." In his view, as long as they could send people into the Dragon Country to obtain valuable intelligence, it was worth paying a price. Upon hearing this, the Secretary of State immediately smiled and said, "I think so too, which is why I agreed to provide them with 300 billion as a cooperation fund." They were so happy that they invited me to their Spring Festival Gala. As soon as this was said, everyone present widened their eyes, and the smiles on their faces instantly vanished, replaced by expressions of shock. "What?" someone exclaimed in disbelief. $300 billion? Are you crazy? That's not a small amount. Others looked at the Secretary of State with astonishment, as if they had just heard the most absurd thing in the world. On the other hand, in the conference room on this side, there was a chorus of joyful laughter. Who would have thought that the real big spender was from that region? Truly relentless, saying $300 billion and just giving it away. What a talent. Someone joked. In fact, there were many intricate details in this negotiation. In this regard, Gu Chuanwen played an indispensable role. Without his meticulous handling, it might not have been possible to lure the Secretary of State into the trap. At this moment, Elder Qin spoke up. "From this, we can also see their obsession with being able to come here. I wonder what they are so fixated on," someone said with confusion. Elder Qin squinted slightly, his expression becoming serious as he said, "No matter what they are obsessed with, or what kind of conspiracy they have, when the day of the Spring Festival Gala arrives, their resolve will be completely shattered." His tone carried a powerful confidence, as if everything was under control. Hearing this, everyone nodded, their eyes filled with anticipation, adding a layer of mystery to the upcoming New Year's Eve Gala. As New Year's Eve approached, the whole world seemed to be immersed in a joyful and harmonious atmosphere. Whether in the homeland or in the vibrant neighborhoods, everywhere was adorned with festive decorations, bustling with excitement, as people celebrated the upcoming New Year. On this day, the Secretary of State also took a special flight back, accompanied by Ambassador Gu Chuanwen. The atmosphere on the plane was somewhat awkward, mainly because the Secretary of State felt increasingly uneasy, gradually realizing that he seemed to have fallen into some kind of trap. Just to attend a Spring Festival Gala, he had spent $300 billion. Although this amount was ostensibly for cooperation, he knew in his heart that it was merely a facade. However, upon reflection, if he didn't spend this money, he might not have had the chance to visit and explore this region at all. He could only comfort himself, trying to make this 300 billion worth something. Thus, even on the plane, he couldn't wait to extract some information from Gu Chuanwen. He cleared his throat and casually began. "Thank you again for inviting us to the Spring Festival Gala. Actually, this is my first time attending such an event, and I was worried about making a fool of myself, so I brushed up on some related knowledge. I really liked one of the performances." Gu Chuanwen politely asked. "Which performance?" The Secretary of State continued. "I forgot the specifics, but there was a line that was very profound. It goes, big hammer 80, small hammer 40. It was exceptionally funny." The Secretary of State made an effort to appear more natural, continuing in a tone that seemed to seek a closer relationship. "Honestly, the Spring Festival Gala programs from a few years ago were really interesting. Those wonderful songs and dances, the hilarious skits, and the magical performances were like meticulously crafted artworks, making it a delight to watch." He squinted slightly, as if lost in memories of those spectacular shows. "However, I feel that the programs in recent years have leaned more towards preaching, lacking some pure joy." He paused and looked at Gu Chuanwen, seemingly wanting to gain some agreement from his expression, then added, "Also, I've noticed that people from your country really enjoy eating something called dumplings. I read that dumplings hold a special significance in your culture, where families gather to make and eat them during important festivals. It's really warm and traditional. If I get the chance, I must try this legendary delicacy." Gu Chuanwen smiled calmly and responded, "It's clear that you've done quite a bit of homework on our Spring Festival Gala and have gained some understanding of our culture. Honestly, I also feel that the later programs have become a bit dull, but I can assure you that this year's Spring Festival Gala will definitely not disappoint you." Chapter 239. Is the country planning to create monsters? The Secretary paused, keenly catching the "we" in Gu Chuanwen's words, feeling a hint of doubt arise. "We? Am I not the only one here to watch the program? Why say we?" He pondered this internally but quickly thought that perhaps the other party was including their bodyguards and team. However, he hadn't forgotten his purpose. He sensed that this was a good opportunity to dig for information, so he asked casually, "It seems you are quite confident about the upcoming Spring Festival Gala. Can you tell me what makes the upcoming program so special? You might not know, but I am very curious about everything and dislike it when people tease me." As he spoke, he looked at Gu Chuanwen with a seemingly relaxed yet expectant gaze. Gu Chuanwen secretly sneered, fully aware of the Secretary's little scheme. However, he feigned helplessness and said, "I'm afraid I can't share that, Mr. Secretary. It's part of our confidentiality agreement. Even I don't know the content. Just that this program is extraordinary." He shot a glance at the Secretary, his expression conveying an undeniable attitude. "Don't worry, after the Spring Festival Gala, everything will be revealed." The secretary felt somewhat unwilling as Gu Chuanwen refused to divulge any information, but he didn't want to push too hard. With a quick thought, he came up with a new topic. A curious expression crossed his face as he asked, "When we arrived, we heard that you had closed the entry and exit passages. That is quite unusual. What is your country planning to do? Of course, if it involves your country's secrets, just pretend I didn't ask. I only came to watch the Spring Festival Gala and have no interest in your country's secrets at all." He said this, but deep down he was hoping that Gu Chuanwen would reveal something. Gu Chuanwen maintained a calm smile and said, "Coincidentally, even if you want to know, I can't tell you anything because it's a decision from above, and I am completely unaware." His tone was flat and firm, showing no signs of wavering. The Secretary of State internally gritted his teeth, but had to keep a smile on his face. Cursing inwardly, "I didn't expect that this group of people would keep their mouths so tight. I can't extract any information at all. It's truly frustrating." At that moment, Gu Chuanwen suddenly chuckled and said, "However, I heard it has something to do with the Spring Festival Gala." The Spring Festival Gala? The Secretary of State nearly lost his temper, thinking, "You closed the entry and exit channels. What does a mere program have to do with it? Do you really think I'm a fool?" However, he still replied, "It seems that this year's Spring Festival Gala is indeed extraordinary." He tried hard to make his tone sound full of anticipation, not wanting Gu Chuanwen to notice his dissatisfaction. Then, the unwilling secretary posed his final question. "Will my visit this time have any impact on your country's entry and exit? After all, you have closed the channels. And we are still visiting. Isn't that unfair to others?" He attempted to find a breakthrough from this angle again. Gu Chuanwen smiled and said, "What's unfair about that? We have closed the regular channels, but you are a VIP contributing $300 billion to the future of humanity. If other countries were as generous as you, they would also be our VIPs, and we would certainly welcome and treat them warmly." The Secretary of State inwardly scoffed. "Humph. Anyway, it's all your reasoning. You're still impressive." He sighed secretly, hoping this visit would yield some results. Otherwise, that $300 billion would really go down the drain. After a while, the plane began to prepare for landing. The Secretary of State looked out the window, his brow furrowing slightly, revealing a hint of confusion. He noticed that the place where the plane was about to land did not seem to be the Kyoto airport he was familiar with. In the distance was a vast expanse of ocean, shimmering in the sunlight. It looked like a coastal city. He was puzzled and turned to voice his question. "Ambassador Gu, this doesn't seem to be Kyoto, right? Where are we headed?" Gu Chuanwen glanced out the window, nodded, and said, "This is indeed not Kyoto airport. But it is the location for the Spring Festival Gala." The Secretary of State, upon hearing this, felt even more puzzled, with many doubts arising in his mind. But he couldn't pinpoint what was wrong at the moment. He thought to himself, "Strange, I remember that the Spring Festival Gala was always held in Kyoto before. Why is it being arranged in a coastal city this time? Could there be an error in the information? Or is there something else going on?" After the plane landed smoothly, the group disembarked, and a prearranged black sedan was already waiting beside the tarmac. The car's body was sleek and glossy, reflecting a mysterious sheen under the sunlight, both low-key and luxurious. The Secretary of State, flanked by bodyguards, got into the car alongside Gu Chuanwen. The sedan slowly started and drove towards their destination from the airport. The scenery outside whizzed by, but the Secretary of State was too preoccupied to appreciate it. His mind was filled with speculations about the venue for the upcoming Spring Festival Gala. Finally, the car arrived at the Longhang shipyard. Upon seeing the grandeur of the shipyard, the secretary was taken aback. The shipyard was vast, seemingly without end. The enormous dry docks resembled giant footprints, deeply embedded in the ground, housing ships under construction. The massive steel frameworks gleamed with a cold metallic luster under the sun, resembling slumbering behemoths. Towering gantry cranes stood like steel giants in various locations, their long arms capable of effortlessly lifting tons of heavy components, evoking a sense of industrial power. Inside the shipyard, workers bustled about, the roar of various machinery blending into a unique industrial symphony. The secretary's eyes were filled with shock and confusion, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Such a grand shipyard. Are they planning to build monsters?" Chapter 240. The prelude is about to begin. The shipyard before him was unparalleled in scale, the largest he had ever seen in his life. The spectacular sight momentarily left him dazed, as if he were standing in a kingdom forged of steel. This shipyard was much larger than those in his own country, and even compared to a certain nation known for its heavy industry, it was equally impressive, if not more so. Particularly when he suddenly recalled the view he had from the plane, noticing a vast area resembling construction sites next to the shipyard, which he assumed was also part of it. Once this thought surfaced in his mind, it surged like a tidal wave, crashing through his consciousness. He was deeply shaken. If all of this were true, it would be terrifying. When did this nation acquire such a massive shipyard? To him, it seemed almost like a fantasy, hard to believe. This nation was no longer the underdeveloped country he remembered. They truly seemed powerful now. The secretary couldn't help but mutter to himself, his voice tinged with a barely perceptible tremor, a natural awe of the unknown and formidable power. At that moment, Gu Chuanwen, seemingly reading the secretary's thoughts, smiled and introduced, "This shipyard in front of you is the birthplace of our Longwei-class strategic vessels." The secretary abruptly turned to him, his eyes widening in astonishment, flooding with surprise like a dam bursting. He stared at Gu Chuanwen, as if trying to find any trace of a joke on his face. However, Gu Chuanwen's calm and confident demeanor made him realize that all of this was indeed a fact. When he looked back at the shipyard, the Secretary of State's expression was no longer one of simple surprise. Instead, it was mixed with complex emotions, including awe at the immense scale of the industry and a deep apprehension about the strategic vessels being produced here. No wonder. This was indeed the shipyard for the strategic vessels. The Secretary of State thought to himself, it seems that only such a formidable shipyard could produce such terrifying warships. The extraordinary combat capability displayed by those strategic vessels on the battlefield must be closely related to these advanced manufacturing facilities and vast production scale. At that moment, he suddenly realized something. How could the other party share such critical information about the strategic vessel manufacturing facility with him? How is that possible? In his understanding, this should be a top secret of the nation. How could it be so easily disclosed? Did they accidentally let it slip? However, upon carefully observing Gu Chuanwen, he saw that the other party appeared completely unfazed, without a hint of panic or regret. He instantly understood that this was definitely not an accidental slip. It was deliberate. Or perhaps, it was a show of strength towards him. It was like saying, this is our strategic vessel manufacturing facility. What can you do about it? If you have the guts, come and challenge us. Humph, perhaps they truly are showing off to us. The Secretary of State felt a surge of indignation, gritting his teeth in silence, and resolved that he must steal some technology to take back. He absolutely could not come here for nothing. Just then, Gu Chuanwen offered to take him on a tour of the shipyard, which was exactly what the Secretary of State had hoped for. He felt a sense of glee inside but maintained a composed exterior as he followed Gu Chuanwen into the shipyard. Once inside the shipyard, the Secretary of State was like a curious child, his eyes darting around. However, he quickly realized that the equipment inside was something he had never seen before. The complex mechanical structures and advanced technological devices seemed to him like mysterious products from another world. Each component and every process appeared so profound and inscrutable that it was impossible for him to remember anything. Moreover, some core areas of the factory were heavily guarded, not allowing them any opportunity for closer inspection. Not being allowed to tour was one thing, but if he could at least get a closer look at the strategic vessels, that would be great. The Secretary of State silently thought, casting his gaze around once more before finally settling on the direction of the shipyard's port. There, a group of ships was docked, reflecting shimmering waves under the sunlight. His eyes instantly lit up, as if he had spotted treasure, his heart racing with excitement. He desperately searched for the silhouette of the strategic vessels among these ships, his focused expression suggesting that the entire world had faded away, leaving only these vessels in front of him. However, to his disappointment, after carefully scanning again and again, he found no trace of the strategic vessels. The originally excited gaze gradually dimmed, replaced by deep confusion and reluctance. At this moment, Gu Chuanwen looked at the Secretary of State with a half smile and joked, "I didn't expect the Secretary to be fond of warships." The Secretary of State immediately felt like a thief caught in the act, a sudden jolt in his heart, and he quickly waved his hand, awkwardly saying, "Not at all. I'm just a bit curious, just a bit curious." He tried hard to make his expression appear natural, but the slightly reddened ears betrayed his nervousness. Gu Chuanwen smiled calmly, saying nothing more, but his smile seemed to have a kind of magic, as if it could see through everything. Under the gaze of that smile, the Secretary of State felt as if he were a young girl stripped of her clothes. With all his thoughts laid bare to Gu Chuanwen, making him feel utterly uncomfortable, he hurriedly averted his gaze, afraid to look in the direction of the port, lest his intentions be seen more clearly by the other party. However, he had already confirmed that there was no Longwei-class strategic ship in the port. This not only did not dispel his curiosity, but made him even more curious. He wondered to himself, where exactly could the Longwei-class strategic ship be hidden? Was there a more secretive location? With his curiosity and doubts intertwined, the Secretary of State followed Gu Chuanwen through the shipyard to the VIP seating area. At this time, Elder Qin and Elder Zhao were sitting in the VIP seats, chatting leisurely. Su Chun was also nearby, feeling somewhat out of place at such an occasion. However, Elder Qin smiled and said, "It's fine, just be a spectator here." The Secretary of State approached, shook hands with Elder Qin, and they seemed to exchange pleasantries. The Secretary's gaze swept over the crowd, and he indeed did not notice the young Su Chun, completely treating him as an inconsequential presence. During a pause in his conversation with Elder Qin, the Secretary subconsciously glanced at the surroundings of the VIP area. At that moment, he suddenly noticed a closed-off area in a remote spot directly opposite the VIP seats. That area was surrounded by high walls and tight security, making it impossible to see what was inside. He frowned, pondering, could that be where the Longwei fleet is located? Chapter 241 Global Attention on New Year's Eve in Long Country. The night was like a vast black silk covering the earth. This expanse of land was illuminated by countless lights. Each light seemed like a warm story, telling tales of reunion and celebration. However, in a household in Luocheng, the atmosphere felt somewhat lacking in the festive spirit. This was because, tonight, an important person, Su Chun, was missing from the family. In the past, the playful scenes between Su Chun and his younger sister, Su Yuan, were like essential seasonings in a dish, indispensable even if they couldn't be tasted. It was precisely this that added a certain flavor of home. But this year, his absence seemed to leave an indescribable emptiness in the house. However, the family did not dwell in disappointment. They gathered around the television. their eyes sparkling with anticipation as they watched the Spring Festival Gala with great interest. The mother enthusiastically called over the neighbors, and the small living room quickly filled with people, laughter and chatter blending together, easing the slight regret of not having Suchin there. Neighbor Old Sue looked surprised and asked with a hint of skepticism, "Old Sue, did that kid Suchun really make it to the Spring Festival Gala? Don't pull our leg. This event isn't for just anyone." Sue's father chuckled, scratching his head with a hint of pride in his eyes, but still tried to keep a low profile as he replied, "That rascal said he was participating in the gala, which is why he didn't come home for the new year. I honestly don't know if it's true or not." As he spoke, he pretended to complain, glancing at Sue's mother. "Look, you called everyone over. What if they end up disappointed?" Sue's mother shot him a secret glare, as if to say, "Humph, you old man. You're the one who made me invite everyone, and now you're pretending." But she said, "Oh well, they're here now, let us just watch together. Who knows? We might actually see our Suchun." One neighbor laughed and said, "Isn't Suchun still in college and hasn't he entered society yet? What a good university experience. Getting a chance to appear on the gala. It's a chance to be seen by the whole nation. That kid is really making something of himself." Old Sue chuckled again. "Who says otherwise? That kid has been clever since he was little. I never expected he'd be on the gala now. If we really get to see him, we'll get to bask in his glory too." Everyone nodded in agreement, eagerly focusing on the television screen, scanning every face that appeared on camera, not wanting to miss anyone who might be Suchun. Their concentrated expressions were as if they were searching for a rare treasure. Meanwhile, in a distant region, after a joint meeting concluded, a representative recalled the meaningful reminder from the representative of a certain country. He felt increasingly that there was something unusual about this year's gala program. Even if he was overthinking it, he didn't dare to slack off. He hurriedly reported the message in full to the higher-ups. Upon hearing the news, the higher-ups were quite puzzled, not understanding what could be so special about a gala program. However, due to their focus on that country and sensitivity to potential information, all the senior officials gathered in a conference room, sitting around the television to watch the live broadcast of the gala. However, due to cultural differences, some of the programs in the gala were difficult for them to understand. Moreover, some segments had a heavy didactic tone, which was completely different from their expectations, leading to growing drowsiness. Just a few hours in, they couldn't resist the fatigue and began to doze off. Soon, the conference room was filled with the sounds of snoring. President Putin shook his head in helplessness. Looking at the representative who initially suggested watching the program together, he discovered that they had already fallen into a deep sleep, sleeping soundly. He did not wake them up. Shrugging helplessly, picked up a steaming cup of coffee, took a small sip to refresh himself, and continued to watch the program seriously. He firmly believed that the actions of the country in question must have profound significance, and he could not miss any details. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a certain leader had just finished handling a heavy workload in the morning and was exhausted, preparing to take a good rest to relieve his tense nerves. Just then, an aide hurriedly barged in, pulling him back from the edge of sleep. The leader, looking confused and slightly displeased, complained, "Do you know how important sleep is for someone my age? Why did you rush in here? What is the urgent matter?" The aide quickly replied, "Mr. President, we received a message from the Secretary of State. He wants us to watch the live broadcast of the Spring Festival Gala from the country in question, saying that this program seems unusual." The leader frowned and asked pointedly, "Is that what the Secretary of State said?" The aide seriously emphasized, "Yes. He specifically instructed us to pay attention to this Spring Festival Gala." The leader paused for a moment, then said, "Gather in the conference room." Soon, a group of senior officials was summoned from their offices, all looking puzzled as they gathered in a spacious conference room. Their eyes were collectively fixed on the large screen in front, which was playing the Spring Festival Gala. However, after watching for a long time, they could not discern anything significant. The leader could not help but yawn and said impatiently, "Aide, is there anything remarkable about this program? It just feels like people are lecturing. It reminds me of my strict teachers from childhood, and it's making me sleepy." The aide also looked perplexed, scratching his head, and said, "I'm not sure, but I think if it were just a boring program, the Secretary of State wouldn't have asked us to focus on the Spring Festival Gala." Taking a deep breath, the leader glanced at the time. It was already past 10 in the evening in that country. The long hours of work combined with this aimless waiting made him feel a bit fatigued. He rubbed his temples and told the aide, "Contact the relevant departments and let them also pay close attention to the Spring Festival Gala, see what they discover." The aide acknowledged yes. Just as he was about to leave, the leader called him back. The aide, puzzled, asked, "Is there anything else, Mr. President?" The leader smiled slightly, a glint of cunning in his eyes, and said, "Arrange for our official media to broadcast the Spring Festival Gala from that country." He paused and explained, "Since they want to create something in the media, let the whole world see what they are up to. I want to see what secrets are hidden in this gala." The aide felt a chill in his heart. He understood that the leader intended to use the official media broadcast to satisfy their curiosity about the secrets of the Spring Festival Gala. On the other hand, there is also a desire to take the initiative in international public opinion. Once there are any signs of change, the relevant parties can respond immediately. He did not dare to delay and quickly arranged the related matters. After he left, the leader continued to stare at the screen, but still found nothing. It made him feel drowsy. In the Prime Minister's residence, the lighting was dim and ambiguous. The Prime Minister was immersed in a world of two with his spouse. Just as the atmosphere was thickening, suddenly a phone call rang out like thunder. The sharp ringing echoed abruptly in the quiet room. It nearly startled the person lying on the bed into a worse condition. He angrily tossed a tissue onto the bed and exclaimed, "Who is calling me at this time?" The Prime Minister, still shaken, picked up the phone. But when he saw that the caller was from the relevant parties, all his anger instantly vanished like water dousing fire. He immediately switched to a subservient tone, continuously agreeing. "Oh, it's you. Yes, yes, yes. We understand. We will prepare right away." After hanging up, his spouse looked puzzled. "Who is calling at this hour?" The Prime Minister shrugged helplessly and said, "It's the relevant parties. I don't know what they're thinking. But they specifically called us to watch the Spring Festival Gala from the Dragon Country. Those programs are not as good as ours. Filled with content we can't even understand. Oh well, since it's an assignment from them, we can only comply." After saying that, he hurriedly contacted all the senior officials to arrange for watching the Spring Festival Gala from the Dragon Country. Although he felt dissatisfied, he did not dare to show any slackness. The same was true for the others. After receiving the directive, they reluctantly complied as well. The senior officials all put aside their tasks to prepare for this inexplicable Spring Festival Gala from the Dragon Country. In another region, a person yawned and complained to the one next to him. "Brother, we've been watching this program for ages, and it's almost morning. This show is so boring. Is the Dragon Country trying to fool us to increase their ratings?" He also mentioned that he had informed other countries in the Desert Alliance. And now they were all broadcasting the Spring Festival Gala live, claiming their ratings were through the roof, but for them, it was truly a torture to watch. Another person looked equally confused. He had also been seriously watching for a long time, but found no clues in any of the programs. He recalled that someone had seriously told him that this year's Spring Festival Gala was extraordinary, but it was almost over, and he hadn't seen anything unusual. After thinking for a long time, he waved his hand helplessly and said, "Forget it, let us just stick it out to the end. Maybe there's some hidden meaning later. If you're tired, you can sleep first." "Okay, brother." The other person curled up with his mechanical battle suit and fell asleep right on the sofa. In the Dragon Country, in a city called Luo, at the Su residence. In the living room, the neighbors were gathered together, filled with laughter but also mixed with a hint of confusion and teasing. "Old Su, the Spring Festival Gala is about to end. Where's your son? We haven't seen him." Old Chun asked with a smile, his tone carrying a teasing note. At this moment, their initial excitement gradually turned into disappointment. "Yeah, Old Su, could it be that Xiao Chun is just joking with you?" Another neighbor, Old Su, chimed in. "I've been watching the TV carefully, thinking it might be Xiao Su, but after a long time, I still haven't seen him." Mr. and Mrs. Su exchanged puzzled glances, equally bewildered. They turned their attention to Su Chen's sister, Su Yuan. With her big eyes blinking innocently, she said, "My brother told me he would participate in the Spring Festival Gala. That's why he can't come home." At that moment, someone seemed to have an epiphany and asked, "What Spring Festival Gala? It wouldn't be the school's Spring Festival Gala, would it?" Su Yuan froze for a second, her mouth slightly open but didn't speak. Seeing her expression, everyone was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. "Haha, Yuan is still as silly as when she was little, believing everything her brother says." Old Chen chuckled. After all, Xiao Chun is still a student. How could he be at the Spring Festival Gala? Those who perform there are all extraordinary talents. But who says our Xiao Chen isn't a top student from a prestigious institution? He still has a bright future ahead. Old Su added with a smile. "Mr. Su felt his face flush with embarrassment, secretly muttering, "You little rascal, I thought you really went to the Spring Festival Gala. Turns out it's just the school gala. You didn't even come home for that? Humph. When you get back, I'll make sure your mother teaches you a lesson." Just then, a loud bang echoed from outside. Colorful fireworks burst in the night sky, illuminating the dark heavens. Meanwhile, the Spring Festival Gala was drawing to a close with the host announcing the countdown. The new year had arrived. The neighbors stood up, exchanging New Year greetings with each other, handing out red envelopes to Su Yuan and remembering to leave one for Su Chen too. They then prepared to take their leave. "Old Su, we should head back," Old Su said. Mr. Su hurried to get up to see them off, muttering, "You're leaving already? Aren't you going to stay a bit longer?" Just then, as the host announced the arrival of the new year, the TV suddenly echoed with the host's mysterious voice. "Dear viewers at home, please don't leave just yet. I'm excited to tell you that tonight's program isn't over. The grand finale is about to begin." Mr. Su, feeling a bit reluctant, called out, "Old Su. Old Chun, there's still the grand finale. Don't you want to watch it before you go?" Old Su waved his hand, laughing. No, we're not watching anymore. The Spring Festival Gala gets worse every year. It's better to head back early." Mr. Su sighed inwardly and said helplessly, "All right then. I'll see you off." Mrs. Su also stood up to join him. Just as they reached the doorway, a sudden exclamation from Su Yuan echoed from inside. "Ah." The sharpness of her voice startled everyone. "What are you making such a fuss about?" Su's mother said with wide eyes, a bit annoyed. Old Su quickly interjected. "It's New Year's, don't disturb the child." As they spoke, they all turned to look at Su Yuan. She was bouncing with excitement, her face flushed like a little rabbit, pointing at the television and shouting, my brother, it's my brother. P.S. on screen." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, as if she had just witnessed the most incredible and surprising scene in the world. Hearing her words, everyone immediately turned their heads to the TV. Chapter 243. It's not about learning. It's a stepping stone to the upper echelons. Upon hearing Su Yuan shout, the others widened their eyes in surprise. They hurried back into the room, their gaze fixed on the television screen, afraid to miss any moment. However, just then, the screen switched, and Su Chen's figure did not appear. Su's mother looked at Su Yuan with some skepticism and said, "Yuan, are you sure you saw him? We can't see him at all." But Su Yuan insisted. Her face flushed, and she anxiously replied, "No, it's really my brother. I saw him just now in that scene." Her eyes reflected an undeniable determination and lingering shock. Just as her words fell, the screen switched again. This time, the scene changed dramatically. No longer was it the familiar lively and festive atmosphere of the Spring Festival Gala, but a grand outdoor setting. Below the stage sat a group of people in crisp military uniforms, standing tall and imposing, clearly high-ranking officials from the nation. Upon closer inspection, there was even the Secretary of State from another country among them. Old Su's eyes widened in astonishment as he exclaimed, "This is something. I've lived this long, and this is the first time I've seen foreign high-ranking officials attending our Spring Festival Gala." The scale of the event was indeed becoming more significant. As he spoke, he scanned the surroundings on the screen, trying to find Su Chen's figure, but after searching all around, he still couldn't find him. Seeing the adults anxiously searching, Su Yuan confidently said, "Don't worry, you will definitely see him. Besides, my brother doesn't seem like a background character. He should be someone important." Upon hearing this, Su's father blushed slightly and awkwardly replied, "Your brother is just a college student. Even if he really participated in the Spring Festival Gala, he would at most be a staff member. How could he possibly be an important figure? Don't talk nonsense, you little girl." In his mind, while he always felt proud of his son, he never imagined Su Chen could play an important role in such a significant event. Just as he finished speaking, the screen switched again. This time, a refined and solemn stage appeared, with a huge button placed on it, radiating a mysterious glow under the spotlight. Shortly after, the host's solemn and passionate voice resonated. "Let us invite our representative to the stage to press this button," symbolizing the beginning of a new era for our nation and humanity. As soon as the words fell, an exhilarating background music suddenly played. Surprisingly, it was the national anthem. The familiar and inspiring melody instantly filled the air, igniting the passion of everyone who heard it. Although Su Chen had not yet appeared, all eyes were magnetically drawn to the television screen. The tense yet expectant atmosphere felt as if the air in the entire room had solidified. Old Su, with a face full of confusion and excitement, said, "What does it mean to open a new era? This is something extraordinary." According to the host, only our top leaders can press this button. Others nodded in agreement, all sensing the significant implications behind this action. As the national anthem played, Elder Qin slowly stood up. His composed posture and dignified face highlighted his important position at this historic moment. In an instant, thunderous applause erupted in the venue. Meanwhile, on the Su residence side, everyone was also buzzing with excitement. Because in the camera frame, not only did they see the respected Elder Qin, but they also joyfully discovered Su Chen standing beside him. "Little Su. It really is little Su," Su's father exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement, tears shimmering in his eyes, reflecting a father's pride and joy. "My son. It truly is my son." Su's mother also covered her mouth, her face filled with disbelief. She never expected her son would appear at such an important occasion. Old Su and Old Chen were also stunned, taking a while to process the situation. "It really is little Su. This kid is impressive. Just look at that old man. Being able to sit next to him. When did our little Su gain such ability?" Old Su said in surprise, his eyes filled with admiration for Su Chen. Su Yuan was equally astonished, blinking her big eyes in confusion. "Isn't my brother just a university student? What is going on? How did he end up next to the nation's high-level officials?" Her cute and bewildered expression made everyone chuckle amidst the tension and excitement. At this moment, the camera shifted to the other side, capturing the Secretary of State. His expression appeared somewhat strange. The smile that was once on his face seemed to have stiffened, revealing a hint of complex emotions, surprise, and confusion. Su Yuan glanced at him, her little mind spinning, and then said, "I know. My brother must have gone to be a translator for our leaders." As soon as her words were spoken, everyone snapped back to reality, and upon closer inspection, they realized Su Chen was indeed next to Elder Qin, while on the other side stood the Secretary of State. At first glance, it really did resemble a translator's position. Old Su immediately gave a thumbs up to Su's parents, with a face full of admiration, and said, "Old Su, your son is impressive. He can be a translator for our country's high-level officials. Truly remarkable." Su's father was grinning from ear to ear, proudly stating, "I knew it. My boy has always been good at foreign languages. He always scores full marks in exams." Su's mother was momentarily stunned, secretly puzzled. "Isn't it true that my son went to the National Defense University because he failed English? If his English were even slightly better, he could choose any top university." However, she quickly consoled herself. He must have worked hard to improve his English in college, so it's gotten better. That's good. Just as this thought crossed their minds, the scene shifted back to Elder Qin and Su Chen. Everyone assumed Elder Qin would go on stage to press the button, as it seemed fitting for a respected leader like him to perform such a historic action at such an important moment. But the next second, they witnessed a shocking scene. Elder Qin extended his hand with a gentle yet solemn smile, gesturing for Su Chen to step forward. Su Chen nodded slightly, his expression serious as he tightened his clothes, then confidently walked onto the stage with firm steps. This scene left the entire audience in a state of confusion. Whether it was the spectators at the venue or those watching at Su's home on television, Everyone stood frozen, as if under a spell. Old Sue trembled as he asked, "Old Sue, is your son really going to be a translator? How can a translator go on stage for this?" His words were filled with doubt and shock. This sudden turn of events completely exceeded their expectations. Sue's father and mother exchanged glances, equally bewildered and at a loss. They couldn't understand how their son, who was still in school, suddenly appeared on such a significant stage, taking on such an important role. Sue's father couldn't help but mutter, "Didn't that little brat just go to college? Why does it feel like he's not studying, but stepping onto a ladder to the upper echelons?" A few minutes earlier, the Secretary of State was struggling to stay awake, his eyes fixed on the live broadcast of the Spring Festival Gala. The jet lag combined with staying up late had left him feeling quite fatigued. As time passed slowly, every minute felt like a torment to him. His patience was wearing thin, like a candle about to burn out. He was filled with questions, constantly complaining. They said this spring gala would be extraordinary. But why has nothing special happened after watching for so long? Am I overthinking? He looked away from the screen and scanned the surroundings, noticing that everyone was still intently watching the spring gala program on the screen. It was an outdoor venue, and even though everyone was dressed in thick clothing, they could still feel the chill in the air. The cold environment, combined with what seemed to be an ordinary program, made for a truly disappointing experience, leaving him increasingly agitated. Until the clock struck midnight, the melodious and solemn chimes echoed in the night sky. The host, with a smile and full of passion, announced the arrival of the new year. At that moment, the Secretary of State finally felt a crack in his composure. A surge of unnamed anger welled up inside him. As he had mentioned before, he had genuinely watched the previous year's gala before being invited to this one. According to past experiences, this moment signified the official end of the show. He had already prepared to stand up and carry out what they called the closing ceremony, even if it seemed somewhat nonsensical. So, in the end, he had really just come to watch a gala? He had spent an enormous amount of money, and it was just to watch a show? He roared in anger within himself. That vast sum of money felt like a red-hot iron branding itself on his heart, causing him deep pain. However, just as he was filled with indignation, the host spoke again. The voice came through the speakers clearly. "Dear viewers at home, please don't go anywhere. I'm excited to tell you that tonight's program isn't over yet. The real highlight is about to begin." Upon hearing this, the Secretary of State was momentarily stunned. His earlier annoyance and pain vanished, replaced by anticipation and excitement. It was coming, finally about to arrive. His instincts told him that the special program prepared by the host country was finally going to be unveiled. What kind of program could it be? Various speculations flashed through his mind. Could it be the launch ceremony of a power network? He pondered. If that were the case, it would be fantastic. This way, they could confirm that the host country was indeed facing an energy crisis, allowing them to gain an advantageous position in the subsequent negotiations. The more he thought about it, the more plausible it seemed, a slight smile creeping onto his lips, his eyes filled with expectation. Just then, the screen in front of him slowly rose. The sound of machinery operating was particularly clear in the quiet night. The surrounding camera crew began to bustle about. Various equipment was quickly adjusted, and the cameras focused on the center of the stage. Suddenly, a rumble filled the air, and everyone looked up to see mech units being deployed. These mechs traced cool trajectories in the sky as they flew toward the stage. The Secretary of State was taken aback, his body slightly jolting. It wasn't that he hadn't seen such mechs before. In fact, he had a vivid memory of them, having been involved in quite a significant incident regarding the disassembly of mechs, which nearly led to the destruction of their factory. What shocked him was that the host country had actually deployed mechs during such a nationwide celebratory gala. However, that wasn't the most shocking part. As the mechs drew closer, his pupils dilated. He noticed that these mechs seemed to be carrying something. At first, he thought it was a weapon, and his heart skipped a beat. But upon closer inspection, his eyes widened in disbelief. It wasn't a weapon. To be precise, it was a camera. What were these mechs doing with cameras? Were they photographers? How generous of you to use such expensive mechs as photographers. He thought he was hallucinating from staying up late. But in fact, it was true. Those were mechs carrying cameras. The Secretary of State couldn't help but curse inwardly. This scene was utterly beyond his expectations. He was puzzled by this action from the nation. Meanwhile, as the large screen in front of him slowly retracted, a brand new stage appeared before everyone's eyes. Behind the stage was the massive manufacturing plant of a shipbuilding company. At this moment, the grand factory had become the backdrop for the stage. Bright lights illuminated the stage from all angles, making it as bright as day. In the center of the stage stood a 1-meter-high pillar. At the top of the pillar was a huge round button, which shimmered with a mysterious metallic luster under the lights. The Secretary of State was completely bewildered. He stared blankly at the button, his mind in a whirl. He simply couldn't understand why a button was set up here. What was this button for? Countless questions swirled in his mind. Finally, an idea struck him. Could it be the power switch for the nation's electricity network? The more he thought about this possibility, the more reasonable it seemed. He was basically convinced. Just as he was lost in thought, the host's enthusiastic voice rang out again. "Let us invite our representative to the stage to press this button," symbolizing the start of a new era for the nation and for humanity. The Secretary of State scoffed internally, thinking, a new era for the nation is one thing. But a new era for humanity? How exaggerated. As a power alternative, an electricity network could at most supply just their own nation. To think it could supply all of humanity was ridiculous. However, He maintained a cheerful expression on his face, not wanting others to see his true thoughts. At that moment, the camera focused on the elder Qin. His dignified and solemn figure appeared on screen as he slowly stood up. His calm movements seemed to carry an invisible aura, causing everyone present to instinctively hold their breath. Soon after, thunderous applause erupted, as everyone applauded to show respect for the esteemed elder. Su Chun was also among the crowd, clapping along with everyone, his eyes filled with respect for Elder Qin. Just then, Elder Qin leaned towards him and whispered, "You brat, come up on stage with me." Su Chun was stunned upon hearing Elder Qin's words. His eyes widened in disbelief, and he said in a low voice, "No way, Elder Qin. It's only right for you to go up on stage. But why do you want me to go up there? You know I don't have much experience. What if I make a mistake in front of so many people? That would be embarrassing for everyone, not just me." Su Chun instinctively refused. After all, only a few high-ranking officials from his country knew him. No one else recognized him. So what qualification did he have to go on stage? Well, he had the qualification, but the audience didn't know him. Seeing that Su Chun was still reluctant, the elder Qin chuckled softly and said, "Embarrassing? Once the aerospace mothership makes its debut, I don't think anyone will have the mood to laugh. All right, stop hesitating and get on stage." The determination in Elder Qin's eyes was undeniable, as if everything was under his control. Su Chun shrugged helplessly. Although he still felt a bit anxious, he knew he couldn't refuse at this moment. He could only brace himself and say, "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, you take the blame." He then slowly stood up. This scene left the Secretary of State momentarily stunned. He turned to his assistant with a puzzled expression and asked, "Who is this young man? Why is he representing us at such an important ceremony? This honor shouldn't be given to just anyone." The assistant also looked confused and shook his head, indicating he had no idea either. Just as the Secretary of State was still bewildered by Su Chun's appearance, Elder Qin smiled at him and made a gesture inviting him to join, his demeanor both elegant and polite. The Secretary of State paused for a moment, uncertain, and asked, "Am I included as well?" Elder Qin replied with a smile, "Of course. You are our distinguished guest." The Secretary of State didn't expect to qualify for this part of the event. After a brief thought, he figured there was no harm in it. Perhaps he could gain some valuable information, so he followed them onto the stage. At this moment, all the cameras focused on the three of them, and the bright lights and lenses made the stage the focal point of the world. Viewers in front of their televisions were also taken aback. They understood the reasons behind Elder Qin and the Secretary of State going on stage, but what about that young man? What right did he have to stand on such a significant stage? Meanwhile, Lu Qingji, who was also invited to this spring festival gala, frowned as he looked at Zhao Yong and expressed his concerns. "Old Zhao, putting Su Chun under the spotlight like this, exposed to the whole world, might not be a good idea. This could ignite public opinion domestically, and conspiracy theories might arise again. That's not the main concern though. I'm worried about Su Chun being targeted by those with ulterior motives." Zhao Yong, however, smiled and reassured him, "Don't worry. Young Su is officially the student representative. He symbolizes the bright future of our country. At this critical moment when a new era is about to begin, he represents the young sun that will lead us into this new epoch. Isn't that a wonderful symbolism? Moreover, think about it. At this crucial moment, do you really think it's appropriate to exclude Su Chun?" Lu Qingji nodded without hesitation. "It's indeed inappropriate." After a pause, he looked puzzled and asked, "Then why allow the Secretary of State to participate as well?" Old Zhao laughed even more happily, pointing to the shining button in the center of the stage, and said, "You might not understand this, right? That button symbolizes the beginning of our nation's new era. But pressing it also signifies a countdown to the decline of a certain country, doesn't it?" As he spoke, he meaningfully glanced at the Secretary of State, who was still grinning on stage. Lu Qingji was taken aback for a moment. Then he reacted and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just then, a camera was aimed at them. The two immediately put away their smiles and pretended to engage in a serious discussion. Su Chun, Old Qin, and the Secretary of State slowly walked onto the stage. Su Chun was about to step aside and give up the central position when Old Qin immediately stopped him. Old Qin looked at him with firm eyes and said, "You stand in the middle." Su Chun widened his eyes slightly, panicking. "Old Qin, this is the central position. How can I stand here? I want to be low-key." Old Qin looked at him with love and seriousness in his eyes, gently saying, "Little Su, forgive us for not being able to publicly acknowledge your identity right now. This is our country's way of compensating you. And you will be the one to initiate our nation's new era." Su Chun was momentarily stunned. He saw sincerity in Old Qin's eyes, a profound trust in him. He took a deep breath and nodded. He then slowly placed his hand on the button. Old Qin followed suit. The Secretary of State, standing nearby, was still trying to eavesdrop on their conversation, but they were speaking in their native language mixed with some strange dialects, and their voices were too soft for him to hear clearly. At that moment, Old Qin and Su Chun looked at him, and the Secretary of State immediately understood that he was also invited to place his hand on it. After hesitating for a moment, he extended his hand. Finally, the three of them pressed the button together. In an instant, the surroundings seemed to come alive with electricity, the light blazed brightly, and the intense illumination was like a sun explosion, causing everyone to instinctively squint. The Secretary of State was momentarily dazzled by the sudden brightness, struggling to adjust to the light while surveying the surroundings, secretly pondering, is it powered? Could this button really be the switch for the nation's power grid? This means that the country is indeed in an energy crisis, having to rely on external energy to survive. Haha, it seems our speculation was correct. He clenched his fist in his heart, a hint of a smug smile on his face, feeling that this was indeed an exhilarating development. Although he hadn't gained any other useful intelligence, being able to confirm this was worth the $300 billion. As soon as the thought emerged, a loud mechanical sound of opening and closing suddenly echoed behind him, like the roar of an ancient beast awakening, reverberating in the silent night sky. He instinctively turned around and saw a massive factory ceiling behind him, slowly opening like a gigantic iron box. Each movement of the metal panels carried a heavy sense of power. Immediately after, it seemed that some enormous machine was slowly rising from within, its colossal body gradually revealing itself, like a mysterious peak surfacing from the depths of the sea. The Secretary of State, whose lips had been slightly curled upwards, suddenly froze at that moment. The look of pride in his eyes vanished without a trace, replaced by shock and fear. He stared blankly at the colossal object before him, his mind blank, completely overwhelmed by the spectacle. At the same time, within the research base of the shipbuilding facility, a world-shocking event was quietly unfolding. As the huge ceiling slowly opened, it was like opening a door to a future world, revealing a colossal object that would astonish the world. Slowly, with endless majesty, it rose from within. The airship carrier made its grand entrance. Its technologically advanced appearance and sleek, sharp lines seemed like an alien product from a distant galaxy, exuding a mysterious and powerful aura. The vast deck resembled an aircraft carrier suspended in the air, yet it had a completely different application scenario. It was not born to conquer the oceans. Its domain was the boundless sky and even the vast, mysterious cosmos. As its full form gradually came into view, everyone present, as well as those watching this spectacle through screens, were left dumbfounded. In a certain conference room, the president, feeling exhausted, was slightly squinting his eyes and dozing off. The surrounding air seemed heavy and oppressive due to his fatigue. Just then, the exclamations of those around him struck like thunder, instantly waking him from his daze. He was about to scold them for their commotion, but when his bleary gaze inadvertently swept across the screen, he was instantly stunned. It was as if he had been cast under a spell, frozen in place. He nearly slipped from his chair, but instinctively managed to grab the table just in time, avoiding an embarrassing scene. However, at that moment, he had no time to worry about his image. His eyes were fixed intently on the screen, as if trying to see through it. Seconds later, his reaction was even more intense than those around him. Like an enraged beast, he suddenly stood up, trembling fingers pointing at the screen, his voice sharp and filled with terror as he questioned, "What is this? What is this? Can someone tell me what the hell this is?" His eyes, besides shock, also revealed an unmistakable hint of fear. It was a primal awe and fear of an unknown powerful force. In his eyes, an aircraft carrier flying in the air was beyond anything he could comprehend. It was no longer an ordinary flying machine, but a spacecraft. No, it was even more terrifying than a typical spacecraft. That enormous and imposing figure made him instantly realize that this should be referred to as a vessel capable of navigating the cosmos, a fortress in space. It was a super weapon capable of altering the balance of power in the world. At that moment, the other high-ranking officials in the conference room were already in a state of panic. They exchanged glances, their eyes filled with terror and disbelief. The nation had developed something new again, and this thing looked far more powerful than the previous mechas. I feel that this spacecraft could accommodate at least thousands of those mechas. A trembling voice from one of the officials said, filled with shock and fear at the speed and achievements of the nation's technological advancements. My guess was correct. They must have made contact with extraterrestrials. How else could they create something like this? The key was that we had no clues at all. Was our intelligence department just slacking off? Another official, filled with anger and frustration, pointed fingers at the intelligence department. The president, amidst the chaos, suddenly turned to Smith. His eyes burned with fury as he shouted, "Mr. Smith, do you have anything to say?" All eyes focused on Smith as if he were under a spotlight. At that moment, Smith appeared to be in shock. His pupils dilated to the extreme, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, trickling down his cheeks and soaking his collar. His body trembled uncontrollably, as if facing the apocalypse. As if he were under siege. He muttered weakly, "They built it. They really built it. They actually constructed that damn spacecraft from the blueprints. No." With that final desperate cry, Smith trembled violently, his legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. This sudden turn of events left everyone stunned. The president's first reaction was to think that he was faking it, trying to evade responsibility. "Do you think you can escape responsibility by pretending to faint?" The president shouted angrily. However, one of the officials quickly stepped forward to check on him, then looked up with a serious expression and said, "Mr. President, he doesn't seem to be faking it." The president then realized the seriousness of the situation. He paused for a moment and quickly shouted, "Get a doctor over here immediately." Fortunately, the palace had excellent medical facilities and a professional medical team, and the doctors arrived on the scene quickly. After a thorough examination, the conclusion was that Smith had fainted due to excessive stress and tension. Upon hearing this result, the president was taken aback. Although he felt dissatisfied with Smith's previous intelligence failures, he couldn't help but sigh at this moment. While you, Smith, have your responsibilities, it's not entirely your fault. Why put so much pressure on yourself? It seemed he had taken all the responsibility upon himself, being a responsible person. However, he also knew the severity of the situation and decisively ordered, Mobilize all satellites to conduct comprehensive monitoring of the aerospace carrier of the Dragon Nation. We must keep track of its every move and ensure it doesn't carry out any covert actions right under our noses. At the same time, our aircraft carrier fleet should be on high alert. Just in case the Dragon Nation has ulterior motives, we need to ensure our own safety. Yes. The officials responded in unison before immediately executing the orders. The leader continued issuing commands. Also, contact our allies to prepare for a coordinated response. The actions of the Dragon Nation are not merely directed at us. They could change the global landscape, and we must unite to face this together. Yes. Meanwhile, in a high-level meeting room of the Allied nation, there was a similar silence. Their leaders stared wide-eyed at the screen, fear evident in their expressions. Their faces were pale, and their level of fear seemed even greater than that of their counterparts. One official trembled as he looked at the Prime Minister, his voice shaking. What the Dragon Nation is researching seems to be called an aerospace carrier, capable of assembling fleets in space. Upon hearing this, the Prime Minister was taken aback, his eyes wide with disbelief. What do you mean? The Dragon Nation can now manufacture spacecraft? The official continued. This is not just a simple spacecraft. It can serve as a carrier. To be more precise, it's an aircraft carrier in space. Its emergence will completely change the mode of warfare and could even affect the global power balance. As soon as this was said, the entire meeting room was enveloped in a heavy silence, as if an invisible force had taken hold. They realized that their country's technological level in aerospace was vastly inferior to that of the Dragon Nation. They were still struggling with basic aviation technology development, while the Dragon Nation had already crossed a huge divide to produce such an advanced aerospace carrier. It was akin to creating an aircraft carrier in an era without warships. What was even more terrifying was that if they could build an aircraft carrier, surely they could also build warships. The Dragon Nation must now have the capability to manufacture space warships. The Dragon Nation was defying the odds. One high-ranking official despaired and lamented. Chapter 247. Shock to the world. One high-ranking official couldn't help but swallow hard, as if that could alleviate his inner tension and fear. He spoke with a trembling voice. The Dragon Nation has always regarded us as enemies, and their citizens are constantly thinking of revenge. At this moment, we must remain calm and avoid doing anything that could provoke the Dragon Nation. Absolutely must not. His gaze revealed deep apprehension. In the past, there were often disagreements among the high-ranking officials due to various interests. But now, faced with the immense deterrence of the Dragon Nation's aerospace carrier, their opinions were surprisingly unanimous. They all believed that it was essential to avoid any conflict with the Dragon Nation as much as possible. Otherwise, what would descend upon this land next would not be as simple as a barbecue. They believed that the wrath of the Dragon Nation would be far more painful than the barbecue. Just as everyone was feeling extremely tense, a sudden urgent phone ringing broke the suffocating silence in the conference room. The Prime Minister seemed to be jolted as if by an electric shock, his body slightly shuddering. Before slowly picking up the phone, he listened to the voice on the other end, his expression changing constantly, responding repeatedly. Good, good, good. Yes, yes, yes. All right, all right. After hanging up the phone, everyone eagerly inquired about the situation. The Prime Minister took a deep breath and said, the call was from a certain country, and they asked us to organize our defenses against the Dragon Nation. Some high-ranking officials frowned and hesitantly asked, what should we do? Defenses need to be organized, but whether to heed their advice is another matter. His words revealed doubts about the orders from that country. After all, this involved the interests and safety of their own nation, and blind obedience was not an option. The Prime Minister pondered for a moment and reassured everyone. There is no need to panic. As long as we have nuclear weapons, we have nothing to worry about. At worst, we can restart globally. He attempted to use such extreme words to soothe the crowd, but there was also a hint of helplessness and despair in his tone. Everyone nodded seriously. They understood that in the face of the Dragon Nation's formidable technological power, their nuclear weapons might be their last resort. But once that card was played, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Prime Minister looked at the new moon of the new year, feeling a mix of emotions. Dragon Nation, why have you become so powerful? Meanwhile, on the other side, in the meeting room, the earlier drowsiness had vanished. The high-ranking officials seemed to be under a spell, their eyes wide open, fixated on the aerospace carrier on the screen, filled with shock, envy, and complex emotions. Although they had prepared themselves somewhat in advance, knowing that the Dragon Nation was making significant moves. But at this moment, when the aerospace carrier truly appeared before them, they realized how inadequate their previous mental preparations were. Their gazes involuntarily focused on their leader, as if waiting for his instructions. With his hands crossed on the table and a serious expression, he finally spoke after a long pause. Let us return the territory that belongs to the Dragon Nation. His voice was deep and powerful, echoing in the silent conference room. Upon hearing this, everyone was taken aback. Although their internal reactions were significant, no one voiced opposition. Odbo, feeling drowsy, was caught between dreams and reality, his eyelids drooping heavily, on the verge of falling asleep. However, when the grand finale of the show from the Dragon Nation made its appearance, the immense commotion instantly banished his sleepiness. Especially at the moment the aerospace mothership emerged, he felt a rush of energy and excitement, kicking his brother Odefo awake from the sofa where he had been dozing off. Odefo was taken aback by the sudden kick, initially annoyed and ready to snap, but he froze in place when he saw the aerospace mothership on screen. He stared at the display, and after a long moment, all traces of sleep vanished. His first words were, "Bro, can we afford this?" ODBO's eyes sparkled with excitement. However, even though they were well off, they felt powerless in front of the aerospace mothership. This thing was probably not something that money could buy. The audience was also in an uproar. Cheers erupted in the streets and alleys. No way, no way, no way. The aerospace mothership. They actually built an aerospace mothership. I knew our mother had something big up her sleeve. Is she planning to reach the skies? If she can make an aerospace mothership, are we about to embark on a cosmic adventure? Incredible, this is getting my blood pumping. A group of young men jumped up excitedly, their faces flushed, eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Building this thing must cost a fortune. Today, I'm definitely buying 2 packs of cigarettes to contribute to our military funding. Another man shouted, waving his arms. At the Dragon shipyard, with the reveal of the aerospace mothership, the ratings for the Spring Festival Gala skyrocketed, setting a historical high. As this live broadcast was aimed at a global audience, in that moment, not only was the Dragon Nation buzzing, but the entire world was swept up in this massive storm ignited by the Dragon Nation. It felt as if the entire world had witnessed the rise of the Dragon Nation. There was a powerful force that could alter the entire global landscape and direction. Meanwhile, the Secretary of State felt his heart skip a beat upon seeing the aerospace mothership. He struggled to adjust his breathing, trying to steady himself. He knew that at this moment, he represented his nation's image and could not afford to lose composure. He fought to keep his expression in check, constantly reassuring himself. It's just a bigger spaceship. Whether it can fly is still uncertain. No need to panic. No need to panic. He attempted to calm himself with self-suggestion, but his slightly trembling hands betrayed his inner tension and unease. However, in the next second, a gentle yet irresistible voice rang in his ears. Mr. Secretary, since you're here, why not come with us to take a look? Once the spacecraft launches, you can enjoy a view of our New Year festivities. It will be a trip you won't regret. Upon hearing this, the secretary could no longer maintain his composure. His eyes widened in shock, and his face revealed an unmistakable mix of astonishment and fear. This spacecraft can actually fly? He never expected that the country would not only manufacture such a massive aerospace carrier, but also make it capable of flight. No. It must be that this group from the country is trying to pull a fast one on him. The Secretary of State firmly believed in his heart that they were just talking nonsense. He gazed at the enormous aerospace carrier in front of him, secretly scoffing. How could they possibly make something this gigantic fly? The deck of this carrier was so vast that it was almost unimaginable, nearly a dozen times larger than their largest aircraft carrier. It resembled a small island floating in the air, and its immense size was intimidating. Not to mention making such a large object take off. Even getting the smallest aircraft carrier to fly would be an impossible task. He stood there, ready to watch the spectacle unfold, with a barely noticeable smirk of contempt at the corner of his mouth, waiting for them to make a fool of themselves. However, he still tried to maintain a calm demeanor, nodding slightly, and then slowly walked with Elder Cheen towards the enormous aerospace carrier behind them. With each step closer to the carrier, he felt its oppressive presence more intensely. When he finally reached the side of the aerospace carrier, he was still taken aback by its size. Under the cover of night, although the surrounding light was not very bright and did not allow him to see every detail of the carrier, its magnificent and complete form was still visible. It appeared like a colossal steel beast emerging from the void. Its sleek and sharp lines suggested an advanced design, with the hull made of an unknown high-strength alloy that glimmered with a cold metallic sheen under the lights. The vast deck resembled an endless metallic plane, far larger than he could have imagined. Various precision takeoff and landing facilities and catapult devices were faintly visible on it. From the side, its hull presented a unique streamlined shape, with the bow resembling a sharp, giant blade, as if it could cut through all obstacles in the universe. The Secretary of State was momentarily stunned, standing there in a daze. Just one glance made him feel as if his soul had left his body, experiencing a strange sensation of traversing time and space, as if he had suddenly arrived in a distant future world. The design and structure of this aerospace carrier were completely unlike anything that should exist in this era. Its technological sophistication and advancement far exceeded his understanding. At this moment, he couldn't help but recall the words of the host. A new era has begun for the country. Previously, he thought it was just exaggeration, but now it seemed that it was not an exaggeration at all. Of course, all of this hinged on whether it could actually fly. If it truly had flight capabilities, then the country would undoubtedly take a monumental step on the world stage, akin to stepping into a new era. With mixed feelings, the Secretary of State slowly walked through the hatch. As soon as he entered the cabin, he squinted slightly, like a keen-eyed hawk, carefully surveying his surroundings. His eyes were like scanners, missing no corner in an attempt to uncover some secrets of the region. To him, being able to step inside this aerial mothership was an incredible opportunity bestowed upon him to gather intelligence, and he was filled with anticipation for potential discoveries. He made an effort to imprint everything he saw deeply in his mind, planning to study it thoroughly upon his return. However, as he moved about inside, he was greatly disappointed. He found that almost all the equipment and pipelines in the cabin were cleverly hidden, as if they had never existed. Even the interior decorations were seamlessly embedded in the walls, without any jarring elements. He tried to search for clues, any traces that could reveal the technological secrets of the mothership, but found nothing. A growing sense of helplessness welled up inside him, and he inwardly lamented. Indeed, they were well prepared, and not foolish at all. Since they allowed him on the mothership, they clearly had no worries about secrets being leaked, crafting everything so flawlessly that he couldn't obtain any information. The only thing he noticed was that the cabin was extremely spacious, far beyond his imagination. He roughly estimated it could accommodate tens of thousands of people, if not more. This led him to ponder more about the functions and purposes of the mothership, while also feeling increasingly uneasy and wary. At that moment, a staff member approached with a pair of special shoes for each of them. He was momentarily taken aback. Looking at the staff member in confusion, not understanding why they needed to change shoes, the staff member patiently explained. These shoes would stabilize their bodies after the mothership was activated. Otherwise, they would be in a state of weightlessness and float. Upon hearing this, he was stunned. Weightlessness? Why would there be weightlessness? His mind was filled with questions and wariness, sensing something was amiss. However, seeing everyone around him putting on the shoes so naturally, he felt it inappropriate to stand out. So he complied and put on the special shoes as instructed. Once he wore them, he immediately noticed their peculiarities. It felt as if a mysterious force was pulling between his feet and the floor. With each step, he sensed an invisible power tugging at him, a feeling that made him very uncomfortable. He even suspected it was a deliberate tactic to embarrass him. But when he saw that almost everyone was wearing the same shoes and moving about effortlessly, he gradually dismissed that thought. Meanwhile, the cabin door suddenly began to close slowly, accompanied by the low sound of mechanical operation, sealing tightly. Shortly after, an electronic synthesized prompt sounded in his ears. The aerial mothership is about to take off. Please pay attention and prepare for safety. The Secretary of State was stunned when he heard the sound, his face filled with shock and disbelief. What? Taking off? Is this country joking? Can this giant really take off? His heart was filled with doubt and fear. He simply could not imagine how such a massive object could possibly have the ability to fly. Just as he was still immersed in shock, the vessel suddenly shook violently. The intense vibrations startled the unprepared secretary, causing him to sway uncontrollably and nearly fall to the ground. This kind of vibration was very peculiar, reminiscent of the pre-launch engine warm-up before a rocket takes off. He screamed in his heart, "No way. Are you serious about this?" Chapter 249, Dragon Hunting Project. The aerospace carrier trembled throughout. The magnitude and frequency of the shaking made the secretary feel terrified. It was as if an ancient giant beast was about to break free from its restraints and soar into the sky, gathering its final strength. The sensation was akin to the shocking, intense tremors before a rocket launch. The entire vessel seemed to be accumulating a tremendous power capable of breaking through the heavens and the earth. At this moment, the secretary was completely bewildered, his brows furrowed, and his eyes filled with confusion and disbelief, unable to comprehend what was happening. He kept questioning himself. Could this aerospace carrier really take off? Could such a big thing actually fly? How is that possible? What is it using to fly? Countless questions swirled in his mind, yet he could find no answers. However, soon, this intense feeling of vibration suddenly vanished without a trace, just as abruptly as it had appeared. The secretary was momentarily dazed, a smile involuntarily appearing at the corners of his mouth as he sarcastically thought, did it run out of fuel so soon? The sudden disappearance of the vibration felt like the engine had just shut off. I really thought this country could take off with its little tricks. His previously tense mood relaxed considerably, believing it was all just a farce. Just as he thought this, his attention was suddenly drawn to the scenery outside the window. To his astonishment, he discovered that everything around them was rapidly descending. No, to be precise, it was the aerospace carrier they were on that was taking off at an incredible speed. Taking off? It really took off? The secretary's eyes widened in disbelief. His body uncontrollably leaned towards the window, eagerly checking the situation. Below, the scene was shrinking rapidly. Those once tall and magnificent buildings and the vast earth were becoming smaller at an alarming rate. In other words, they were truly flying, and at an astonishing speed. The secretary was completely dumbfounded, staring blankly out the window, his mind a blank slate, utterly overwhelmed by the incredible sight before him. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was dreaming. However, everything was happening right in front of him. How could it be fake? At this moment, the Secretary of State was completely stunned. Meanwhile, this scene was clearly witnessed by the president of a certain country. Watching the space carrier actually take flight, he felt as though he had been hit by a heavy bomb, suffering a tremendous blow. His face instantly turned pale, and his eyes were filled with shock and fear. How could this country possess such terrifying technology? How did they manage to do it? Who can tell me how they accomplished this? The president almost shouted, his voice echoing in the conference room, filled with anger and frustration. He immediately ordered that all scientists from his country be urgently called in. He demanded that they analyze the current situation carefully. The scientists dared not slack off in the slightest. After closely analyzing footage captured by other angles from that country, they discovered that the space carrier did not have any propulsion devices similar to rockets. This finding left them all perplexed, as their understanding was that without propulsion devices, it should not be able to fly at all. One expert in dynamics, while observing the footage, suddenly noticed the shoes of the people inside the cabin. His eyes lit up, and a bold hypothesis formed in his mind. Anti-gravity. This country must have mastered anti-gravity technology. With anti-gravity technology, there would be no need for additional propulsion devices to generate power. Once this idea was voiced, the scientists erupted in discussion. realizing that if this country truly had mastered such technology, it would provide an immeasurable boost to technological development. It could even serve as a foundation for creating real spaceships, making space travel no longer an unattainable dream. They eagerly hoped that the president could find a way to obtain this anti-gravity technology from that country, as that would allow their own technology to soar and regain a dominant position on the global technological stage. The president looked at these excited scientists with a speechless expression, secretly thinking, if I had the ability to obtain this, would I still choose to be president? How easy would that be? Just then, a scientist raised a new question. How high can this space carrier actually fly? Moreover, it would need to be powered by nuclear energy to support its enormous energy consumption, right? After pondering for a moment, the dynamics PhD stated, ordinary nuclear power technology might not be sufficient. Do you think it's possible that the space carrier is powered by nuclear fusion? In my opinion, only nuclear fusion could possibly lift such a massive space carrier into the air. This statement startled everyone, including the PhD himself, who was taken aback by his own bold idea. He quickly waved his hand and said, I must be overthinking it. How could nuclear fusion technology be so easily conquered? Just then, a voice suddenly exclaimed, look, the space carrier has stopped. It is hovering in mid-air. Upon hearing this, everyone turned their attention to the screen. The spacecraft carrier, without any propulsion devices, hovered steadily in mid-air, creating a scene reminiscent of a science fiction painting that defies the laws of physics, leaving people shocked and speechless. The leader quickly glanced at his general, his eyes filled with urgency and anticipation, and asked, at this altitude, do you have confidence in bringing it down? The general carefully observed and confidently replied, my eyes are my measure. This height should be around 10,000 meters. It is within our weapon's attack range. Moreover, the size of the target is substantial, making it easier to hit. They will definitely struggle to withstand the assault from our swarm of aircraft and missiles. Of course, this is assuming there are no exceptionally formidable weapons on their carrier. Hearing this, the leader let out a sigh of relief. He squinted slightly, a hint of determination flashing in his eyes. He immediately issued a mission to the Air Force commanders. The mission was codenamed Dragon Hunt. He was resolved to take action, attempting to curb the significant threat posed by the carrier. A new contest of power was about to unfold at 10,000 meters above sea level. You have paved your own path to destruction, the leader declared fiercely. In the heavily guarded meeting room, the atmosphere was tense enough to be suffocating. The Dragon Hunt plan against the carrier was like a taut bowstring, ready to unleash a sharp arrow. Before implementing this plan, the leader summoned all senior military officials into one room. His serious expression and the solemn atmosphere made every general entering feel the gravity of the situation. With a stern face, the leader addressed the core of the military force, facing an unprecedented challenge. He gestured for his assistant to play the footage of the carrier's debut. As the massive and striking images appeared on the screen, an invisible force seemed to envelop the room, and it fell silent enough that a pin drop could be heard. The sci-fi and imposing design of the carrier was truly shocking. Its smooth and powerful lines, along with the enormous hull, left people in awe at first glance. It resembled a steel giant from a future world, suspended in mid-air, exuding an air of awe, seemingly announcing to the world that the technological prowess of its nation had reached a new height. It also served as a reminder to all nations not to provoke a waking lion. At this moment, an Air Force general broke the silence. His voice carried a hint of tension and urgency as he inquired of the leader, Mr. President, what do our experts say? The leader slowly turned his head, his gaze serious and piercing as he looked at him. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, our experts haven't said anything particularly special. They just feel that, given our country's current level of technology and research progress, it will take at least 50 years before we can develop something similar to this flying machine. His words were like a boulder thrown into a calm lake, instantly stirring up waves. The other generals exchanged glances, and from each other's eyes, they saw deep shock, a mix of astonishment and disbelief at the rapid technological advancement of the nation in question. In their previous understanding, this nation had always been striving to develop, but was merely trying to catch up with them, maintaining a significant distance. However, at this moment, witnessing the power of the aerospace carrier firsthand, and then reflecting on their own country's technological achievements, they realized that the nation had already disappeared behind them. Like a dark horse, it had surged ahead. The current technological strength of this nation was beyond their reach. One general couldn't help but clench his fists in anger, slamming a fist on the table, shouting, damn it, why don't we have any intelligence on the aerospace carrier? Are our intelligence agencies just a bunch of fools? His face turned red, flames of anger burning in his eyes. He felt immense frustration and annoyance at the intelligence department's failure. If they had known, even a little beforehand, they wouldn't be so passive and could have at least made some preparations. Yet, the intelligence agency provided nothing. They felt like a bunch of useless people. Another individual, feeling helpless, shrugged and said, don't blame Smith too much. He's already been hospitalized out of anger. I don't hold him responsible. It can only be said that the nation's intelligence work is quite effective. Moreover, it's too late to talk about this now. The urgent matter is to deal with this new weapon of war. At this point, he paused, his expression becoming more serious, speaking of new developments. The nation's mechs are also quite formidable. If they use the aerospace carrier as a platform to deploy their mechs, it will be difficult for us to counter them. His words plunged everyone into contemplation. Their minds involuntarily conjured images of the highly feared individual combat mechs that had once struck terror into their enemies on the battlefield. Those agile and powerful mechs left a profound impression on them. If the individual combat mechs were combined with the aerospace carrier, it would create the most powerful airborne forces in the world, with combat capabilities that were almost unimaginable. The thought sent shivers down their spines, as if they could already see the terrifying scenes on future battlefields. Yet, at the same time, this fear fueled their determination to destroy the aerospace carrier. They would never allow this nation to act recklessly on the world stage with such a superweapon. A robust general named Derek slowly stood up. His imposing figure cast a large shadow under the lights, giving an oppressive feeling, as if he were a small mountain. His gaze was firm and serious, filled with an undeniable determination. The airspace mothership of the nation must be destroyed at all costs. The leader slightly nodded in agreement, that is certain. However, General Derek waved his hand, his expression becoming more serious, and said, "No, gentlemen, you may not understand what I'm really trying to convey." An army general, somewhat impatient, remarked, "Come on, don't be cryptic. Isn't it just a bigger aircraft? I really don't understand what the nation is thinking to create such a thing, such a large target. Is this a test of our missile accuracy?" His words carried a hint of disdain, as if he did not truly recognize the significant threat posed by the airspace mothership, believing everyone was too tense. They are unbeatable, after all. If you think that way, you are gravely mistaken. General Derek raised his voice, his eyes revealing a hint of disdain. He stood up, walking with heavy, powerful strides to the monitor displaying the airspace mothership. He extended his robust finger, pointing at the airspace mothership on the screen, and slowly said, "This airspace mothership is far from what you imagine. As far as I know, the true purpose of the airspace mothership is not within the planet, but..." He paused for a moment, then slowly raised his finger to point at the sky. Everyone followed his direction, their faces initially showing confusion, and then, as they gradually understood the implications of General Derek's words, disbelief began to show in their expressions. General Derek looked at their faces and said sternly, "Wake up, everyone. The nation is now preparing to explore the universe. They do not intend to play with us anymore. If we do not destroy their airspace mothership, we will only be left watching them colonize planets beyond our world, leaving us with nothing but scraps. By that time, they will be the richest nation in resources, possessing the development rights to the entire universe. And when that time comes, we can only watch and envy. Even jealousy will be out of the question." General Derek took a deep breath, seemingly awed by the grand cosmic exploration plans of the nation, while also feeling deep concern for the future ahead. After speaking, he fell silent and slowly returned to his seat. At that moment, everyone in front of him was stunned. The entire conference room fell into a deathly silence. Sometimes, a silent pause can convey the seriousness of a situation more than noise. At this moment, they truly realized the significance of the Dragon Hunt plan. They could not tolerate the nation stepping into the vastness of the universe alone. They would not allow anyone to get ahead of them. In their hearts, the airspace mothership must be destroyed. This was no longer just a military confrontation. It was a life and death struggle concerning their status in the future world and even the universe. Chapter 251: A gift for the Blue Planet. However, new problems have emerged. The senior officials were furrowing their brows, their expressions grave. They did not know how to destroy the massive spacecraft hanging in the sky. Various worrying thoughts surged in their minds like a tide. What if the spacecraft was equipped with unimaginably powerful weapon systems? What could they do then? After a long period of contemplation, an experienced and meticulous general proposed a relatively cautious and thorough suggestion. First, send out unmanned reconnaissance aircraft to gather as much detailed information about the spacecraft as possible. We must not launch an attack blindly. We need to know our enemy as well as ourselves and avoid unprepared battles. His words echoed in the silent conference room, and the other generals nodded in agreement. In this complex and dangerous situation, this seemed to be the safest approach. The president sat in a chair that symbolized power and decision-making, his face dark like the sky before a storm. "Let us do it this way," he immediately ordered. At that moment, after a long period of gloomy weather, the cold rain finally began to fall, just like the coldness reflected in his eyes. The president gritted his teeth and said fiercely, "The day the spacecraft is unveiled will be the day it is destroyed." Meanwhile, inside the cockpit of the spacecraft, an atmosphere of advanced technology permeated the air. Su Chun entered the cockpit and command center alone. The staff in the cockpit were fully focused on the data on the dashboard. When they saw Su Chun approaching, out of deep respect and obedience, they instinctively prepared to stand and salute. However, Su Chun quickly and gently waved his hand, stopping them with a friendly smile. Everyone should focus on driving. Maintaining a high level of concentration is most important at this moment. He understood that any slight distraction during this critical flight could trigger unpredictable potential dangers. Therefore, he hoped the staff could remain dedicated to their posts. Fortunately, the Secretary of State was not in the cockpit at that time. Otherwise, he would have been stunned by the scene before him. A group of rigorously trained professionals with rich knowledge and experience were showing such high respect to someone so young. Just recently, this young man had stood in the position symbolizing supreme glory and significant responsibility, personally pressing the button that marked the dawn of a new era. This peculiar and perplexing scene would naturally evoke intense curiosity and deep confusion about Su Chin's identity in anyone who witnessed it. Suchin steadily walked to the control panel and softly inquired of the pilot, "How is the spacecraft performing? Is there any abnormal data?" The pilot immediately straightened up and replied clearly and loudly, "Report, Commander, the altitude is about 10,000 meters, and the system is functioning normally. All data is operating stably within a safe range, and there have been no abnormal fluctuations in any of the equipment." Suchin nodded slightly, a satisfied expression on his face, and said, "This is our first high-altitude test. Previously, we conducted hovering tests at the base. However, after comprehensive and in-depth analysis and simulation by the system AI, even during high-altitude flight, performance will remain stable, which fully demonstrates the reliability and advanced nature of the aerospace mothership." The pilot's strong desire for exploration burned like a raging fire within him. He looked at Suchun, his eyes sparkling with anticipation, and asked excitedly, "Commander, are we going to conduct the extreme test?" The so-called extreme test refers to deep space testing. At that time, the aerospace